This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening and welcome to the December 7th, 2022 South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to announce all commissioners are present this evening, and I also would like to extend a special welcome to Commissioner Jacob Roth here to my left. He was newly appointed to our board at our special meeting on November 30th by unanimous vote of the Board of Commissioners, so welcome, and we look forward to serving our community with you. Moving on through the agenda, I'd like to announce that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted to the website for public access. At this time, I'm going to ask our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, to review our public virtual meeting rules.
Thank you. The hybrid meeting rules are as follows. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the beginning and end of the agenda. Public comment will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For all listed agenda items, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually, please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid any background noise that may cause interference during the meeting. The chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone and you will have the chance to comment or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The board did not meet in executive session, so we have none to announce this evening. Moving on to agenda item 4, courtesy of the floor. If there's any member here of the public who has any comment on a non-agenda item, now would be your opportunity to do so. Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to our meeting minutes. We have 2 sets to approve this evening. Our first is from the November 16th Board of Commissioners meeting. They've been distributed to the board. Are there any questions or comments on the meeting minutes?
Commissioner Kelly, I will abstain from voting on both the 11:16 and 11:30 meeting minutes as I was not yet a member of the board at the time.
Very good, thank you. Seeing and hearing no public comment, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Our second set of meeting is from the November 30th, 2022 Board of Commissioners special meeting. Are there any comments or questions on that set of minutes? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Moving on to presentations this evening. We have a public hearing, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, approving the transfer of restaurant liquor license number R-7726 into the Township of South Whitehall. And I will call on our Township Solicitor, Joseph Zader, to address this item for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I'll officially open this public hearing. Though not required by law, the applicant has requested that this be transcribed through court reporter, so that is occurring through Esquire Deposition Solutions. This is a public hearing requesting authorization of the intermunicipal transfer of liquor license number R-7726 from MACOS, M-A-C-H-O-S LLC to CAPL Retail LLC in South Whitehall Township for 1825 Route 309. The Pennsylvania Liquor Code authorizes intermunicipal transfer for roughly about a decade. This process has been in place. The requirements for transfer are first, that a public notice appear once each week for 2 successive weeks, not more than 30 days and not less than 7 days in a newspaper of publication in the general area. That has occurred with that advertising occurring on November 16th and November 23rd. There's a requirement for a public hearing, which is occurring this evening. And ultimately, there's a requirement for a resolution or an ordinance adopted by the governing body, and the Board of Commissioners are prepared to address the question this evening. The purpose of a public hearing is to receive public comment and recommendation, but should there be any opposition or should there be any recommendation, I'll address with the board and the public at that time what the legal requirements are. I would note that if the board approves this application this evening, other requirements in the ordinances of South Whitehall are not waived. They're not granted any waivers or variances or approvals. Rather, the application approval, if issued this evening, is for the transfer of the license only. So it does not address things like zoning, land development, stormwater regulations, whatever might ordinarily apply, those regulations would still apply. That having been said, I'll turn it over to Attorney Brichta on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anthony Brichta. I'm an attorney at Norris McLaughlin. We represent the applicant CAPL Retail LLC regarding this request for an intermunicipal transfer of restaurant liquor license 7726 to the property located at 1825 Route 309 in South Whitehall Township. We do have a representative from the applicant here, Wayne Masoner, who serves as the category manager for CAPL Retail. And as your solicitor correctly noted, the purpose of this hearing is to determine whether allowing the liquor license at this location would adversely affect the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. So we're here to provide a little context on how this applicant would use the liquor license if the township would allow the transfer. As your solicitor also noted correctly, if the transfer is approved, the applicant would still need to separately apply for and be approved by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board for this transfer. So the first step is the transfer by the township. Once that's approved, we still have to go through the normal vetting process of the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, just like any liquor licensee would have to do so. And as your solicitor noted, we'd still be required to comply with all township ordinances. So for the specific plans, what the applicant is planning to do, as you know, this is very close to the township building. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the location. It's an existing Exxon gas station and a Unimart convenience store. This location already has a convenience store within it and general sales. And the applicant is proposing, as it's done at other locations, to add the sale of limited alcoholic beverages. There's adequate parking. There's a good amount of property around the physical store. So we think that this location is well suited to add a liquor license. The applicant would make only internal modifications to its current building. It would not be extending the footprint of the space or otherwise making significant modifications, but it would be making internal modifications and construction just to allow for the safe and appropriate use of the liquor license within the store. The applicant's proposed use, although it's an R license, a restaurant retail liquor license, it's not designed to be a bar or a restaurant. The applicant is going to primarily do to-go sales of beer. And at this time, it's anticipated only beer. They do not do wine at any of the other stores. They could, of course, add to-go sales of wine, but that's not in their initial plans at this time. PLCB regulations limit the takeout purchases of beer at 192 ounces of brewed beverages, which is equivalent to a 12-pack of beer. And if they chose to add wine later, it would be 3 liters of wine maximum, which is the equivalent of 4 bottles of wine. We are requesting the intermunicipal transfer because we're not able to locate a license in Lehigh County and also in this township for sale. And as your solicitor noted, the license we're seeking transfer is from Machos LLC, which last operated on 9th Street in Allentown. As part of converting the property's interior to accommodate the use of the liquor license, the applicant's going to be sure to ensure that the property provides for adequate square footage and seating as required by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, which generally consists of 30 seats and 400 square foot of seating. The prepared food available at the convenience store will be available to customers who wish to sit in the beer and liquor license area. Although if you've been to a Wawa or similar convenience store that utilizes liquor license in this way, you've probably seen what it looks like. It's just, next to the coolers. It's a separate area. It's not really designed to be a place where people come, stay on the premises and drink. While we're not allowed under PLCB regulations to completely prohibit the sale of on-premise consumption, we are allowed to limit it in our reasonable discretion. So we anticipate limiting it to no more than 1 or 2 drinks maximum for anyone who, on the off chance, would like to dine on the premises. Security and safety is extremely important to this liquor licensee. So to that end, we already have the facility covered by a number of security cameras like you would at many businesses, including convenience stores. And we'd be adding additional security cameras specifically pointed at and focused on the point of sale area for any alcohol sales. And we obviously ensure that all PLCB requirements are complied with for IDing patrons and making sure people are of legal age to consume and purchase alcohol. We'd also be ensuring that all of our staff that are involved in the sale or service of alcohol would be RAMP certified through the Pennsylvania Responsible Alcohol Management Program. So with that, we would respectfully request that the board consider the transfer and a favorable resolution allowing the transfer of this liquor license into the township. We do have a representative if there's any questions, or I'm happy to answer.
With this point of the hearing having been reached, then next item would be for any questions or comments from the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Attorney Zader.
Yeah, I do have a question. Actually, I think you may have addressed it. I had looked at this over the weekend when I got the packet. And you mentioned staff. I have frequented that store, and I don't recall looking at any of the individuals there that young that they would be serving or selling alcohol. So the staff would have to be approved by the Commonwealth to sell beer?
The individual staff members aren't formally approved. What they are required is anyone who's involved in the sale or service of alcohol has to get what's called go through RAMP training, the Responsible Alcohol Management Program. So they'd have to be of legal age 18. And then if they're going to be involved in the sale of alcohol, they're required to go through the RAMP training program for sale and service. So it's a course that you're required to take. There's a separate course if you're an owner manager, but there's one that you're required to take if you're a server. So all of the staff.
So 18, you can.
Correct.
Okay, that you answered my question. Thank you.
Just a piggyback question on that. Is that a one-time training for staff, or do they need refresher courses once a year?
I believe it's valid for a 2-year period. So you can hire the person without them having taken the course. Typically, most applicants such as ours would make them take the course before they're allowed to do the service of alcohol. I believe you're given a 6-month grace period where they have to get it within the first 6 months of being hired in the service of alcohol. And then I believe it's valid for a 2-year period, and then they have to do a refresher course every 2 years.
Thank you.
So I have a question as well, quickly, and this is basically for my own general knowledge. I noticed you attached a copy of check number 4685 in the amount of $500. I don't know how much a liquor license costs, but what is that $500 for, that good faith payment?
I believe the good faith payment that was made to the township is not for the purchase of any liquor license. We buy that directly from the prior licensee, Machos in this case. I believe the $500 is a payment to compensate the township for costs incurred by the township with respect to this hearing, getting a court reporter, having your solicitor review, prepare a resolution, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Attorney Brickman, I'm going to ask a question because I don't want to assume the answer.
Okay.
Okay. So you mentioned initially the intention is to sell beer, possibly sometime in the future, including wine in those sales.
That's correct.
Here's what I don't want to assume, though. This is a restaurant license, liquor license for a restaurant.
Correct.
So is there, in the future beyond perhaps wine, can you sell spirits?
Not to go. So we're not going to have spirits on the premises. I mean, this is a restaurant liquor license.
Right.
But we're only going to have beer and wine to go. We're not intending to have any spirits.
You're not intending to, but this license would allow you to if in the future you decide to do that?
Correct. So it's an R license, which is a standard restaurant liquor license.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Commonwealth has not yet created a separate class of licenses for convenience store operations.
Right.
So convenience stores that want to offer the to-go sales, their only option is to acquire the same restaurant liquor license that you would be able to get if you were a larger brick and mortar restaurant that was going to have people sit down and eat meals and primarily consume on the premises.
Just to make sure that I understand completely. So sometime in the future, you may be selling, the establishment may be selling liquor outside of beer and wine. You have the ability and authority to do that.
You would, in theory, have the ability and authority to
Okay.
modify your operations. There's no intent of this applicant to do so.
Just to clarify, as a follow-up to Mr. Osborne's question, the ability to sell spirits, would that be limited to sales, for example, of cocktails or spirits in the store for consumption in the store as opposed to takeout? You wouldn't sell a bottle of bourbon, for example.
You could not. That is exactly correct. You know, with any standard restaurant or license, you cannot sell liquor to go. You can only sell very limited quantities of brewed beverages and wine. And again, although we're not intending to do wine, there's also a separate process. You have to get what's called a wine expanded permit. You have to get the whole facility ramp certified. It's a more cumbersome process. But you are correct. Under no circumstances could you sell distilled spirits to go.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from the public at this time? Going once, going twice. Virtually, do we have anything, Mr. Manhart? Nothing. Any final comments or questions from the Board of Commissioners or from staff? Hearing none, I will formally close this public hearing. Mr. Kelly, if you deem it appropriate, this would be a time where you could take up possible vote to approve or disapprove of the resolution.
Very good, thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, approving the transfer of restaurant liquor license number R7726 into the Township of South Whitehall?
Make a motion.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any other discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Good luck, sir.
Moving on during our presentations to agenda item B, we have Hotel Hamilton LLC major subdivision number 2015-107. This is an update on the current project status. And I'm going to ask our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, to please guide us in this agenda item.
Yes, so this is for the Hotel Hamilton. When they were last before the BOC requesting an extension, one of the conditions of that extension was for them to appear at tonight's meeting with an update as far as progress. With that, I will hand it over to Greg to give a little bit more detail on where they're at. The applicant is here. I believe he handed out some information for everybody to review as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I actually don't have much to add to that. Basically, as a little background, this is an application to develop properties at 3051 Hamilton Boulevard, 3125 Hamilton Boulevard, 3127 Hamilton Boulevard, and 3141 Hamilton Boulevard. The plan, as most of you have seen, proposes the consolidation of the 4 lots, alteration to the existing building at 3141 Hamilton Boulevard, which is the King George Inn, and the construction of 192 parking spaces and 3 commercial buildings on the 5.36 acre tract. The applicant achieved final plan approval at your May 20th, 2020 meeting. They've had 4 extensions since then. And as Dave mentioned, the last extension in September 7th, 2022 required them to come in after 3 months and give an update. So I believe the applicant's team is here, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening.
Good evening.
As Greg mentioned, we were here in August to ask for an extension of time. And when we were here following that meeting, before that meeting, we got this August 31st letter with stating the conditions of approval to try to help to go through where we are with dotting the i's and crossing the t's on the approval. We provided you with a status report on where we stood with trying to satisfy those conditions. Our team's been working with the various members of the township to go through all these conditions and satisfy them. We've been working with Tony and Pidcock on getting the cost estimates reviewed and approved, the descriptions approved, the plans approved. We were working with Joe's office on the legal agreements. They've been coming along well. We've been working with Greg and David's folks on some of the questions. We've been working with Herb and Mike on trying to resolve any of the outstanding issues with the plans and all the public works items. Things are moving along, I think, pretty well with it. Hopefully we can get things resolved here pretty quickly. There was one item that kind of fell through the cracks that we want to try to push here in the next couple of weeks. One outstanding item that we have with PennDOT yet is a traffic signal easement agreement. We'd ask that the township try to push that through and execute that as soon as possible. We're ready to sign it as soon as the township's ready to sign that. That has to go into PennDOT. We have to get the PennDOT highway occupancy permit signed. We have all the other items, the certificate of insurance, the letters of credit with PennDOT. We're ready to get that done. And other than that, if there's anything that you have any questions on, we're ready to answer that. Or if there's any questions that staff or the commissioners have, we can answer any of those questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the board if there's any questions.
Do you feel as though you'll be able to meet the remaining conditions?
Hopefully so.
Okay.
I don't want to promise anything at this point. This has drug on a lot longer than it should have, but there's a couple little complications here that we should not have had, Jacob, but hopefully we can get this wrapped up at this point in time.
Thank you.
Piggybacking off of Jacob, we originally talked about a 6-month extension with having come back today. Give us a recap, which you've done. So you think we're still on track for another 3 months?
Yeah, hopefully so. Hopefully so, David.
Okay.
And if not, we'll be back to just to let you know where we stand at that point in time. But things seem to be coming along pretty well. I don't know if David, if any of you folks have anything else that you think could be a problem at this point.
You made a comment that you're ready to sign off with PennDOT once you get the information from us. Where are we, if I may ask Herb, with that information for them?
There was a question about this traffic signal easement, and we worked with Joe's office to get that put together. And unfortunately, it fell through the cracks a little bit, and we did not get back to say that we were okay with the easement. We just recently let Jennifer and Joe's office know that we were satisfied with the agreement, and I think Jennifer is processing it now. Joe, is that the case?
That's correct. Yeah. But we're not holding you up.
No, it was us that we.
Okay. All right, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we thought it was taken care of, and somehow it just didn't get taken care of. So we're ready to get, I think everybody's ready to get it executed and get it back into PennDOT.
I have one question for you. First, I want to thank you for this because my question was, how much progress have you made since we met in September? So I appreciate this. It's very detailed. I wish I would have gotten it earlier, but I got it today and I was able to peruse it and I appreciate the detail you put into it. The second thing I wanted to ask you, and forgive me because I wasn't always on the board, I believe that the King George Inn structure itself you were keeping as office space. Is that correct?
We're not quite sure what's going to happen with it. It was decided that the walls of the King George are historic, but the rest of the structure is not. And we're hoping to eventually adaptive reuse it. It may be used as an office or some other use, but the intent is to keep the stone walls intact and hopefully be able to make some kind of use out of it.
Okay, and that was my next question. Are you going to try to preserve as much of the inside, the interior, and
the decision was made that there's not much inside. Most of that was when they were using it for a restaurant, a lot of that was modified, so it really wasn't historic anymore because of the renovations and modifications that were made inside. Other than some of the stonework and stuff, a lot of it was all modified.
Just a follow up to that. I was curious what the status is of the historic resource preservation easement of this property or that building, I guess I should ask. What the status is of
I think the ordinance or the agreement is moving along pretty well. I think Attorney Hogan is working with attorney, with Jennifer as far as getting that finalized. I think almost everything is resolved with that at this point in time. I think there was just one or two questions left to get it resolved.
That document, as well as the other developers' agreements, this one being the one that's out of the ordinary, the other being the ordinary, they're all in process in my office.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Any from the public? Okay. We appreciate you coming in tonight to give us an update on the project, and we would expect to see you then in about 3 months.
Good. Well, everybody have a great holiday season, and thank you.
Same to you. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item C, the Pidcock Company, review of proposed 2023 professional fee service. And the explanation for this item will be by our township engineer, Tony Tallarida, on behalf of the Pidcock Company.
Good evening, commissioners. It's good to be on this side sometimes, but so again, Tony Tallarida from the Pidcock Company and Township Engineer representative. Tonight, I'm here to present our 2023 professional rate schedule. Based upon our predictions of the activities that we assume we will be doing for the upcoming year and the current status of the economy, we respectfully request an increase across the board of 2.8%. As you all know, as we all know, we've all gone to the grocery store, the gas station. Current inflation in the nation is extremely high, as well as energy costs, healthcare, cost of living for our staff. And because of that, we request an increase of 2.8%. We understand that there's many different factors that lead into this. We feel comfortable that we recognize, though, that South Whitehall is faced with the same challenges. I've sat through all the budget hearings and understand that it's a difficult time for not only everyone as a professional, but also as the township. Therefore, we feel comfortable and we hope that understand we'd like to continue our partnership together.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
I'll open it up to the board with any questions or comments. Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Tony, I was waiting for this night. Just a couple questions.
Sure,
so the 2.8% increase, is that on every category as far as staff is concerned?
It is an average. So each one varies a little bit. You can see we kept the whole number. So it's not as if everyone went up exactly 2.8. What we did is added up categories from last year and this year. That difference is 2.8. So it's very close, but not exactly 2.8 for each individual.
Sure. Okay. But the general idea is 2.8% across.
That is correct.
Okay. You use the title manager, municipal services. Where do your services personally fall on this scale? Are you senior engineer too?
That's correct. I am senior engineer too. That's what.
Yeah.
That's
okay. And I haven't really looked at your fee schedule in a number of years. So in addition to this, you have several notes. So
Correct.
my question is, I don't see anything unusual in these notes, but has anything changed in those notes from last year?
No, they're the exact same notes.
Okay.
Very standard, probably for the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Just a question. I say you're a senior engineer. What specifically did your rate go up? You said 2.8 was the average. What did your specific rate go up, since I think you're more involved with the township than most of the other people?
I don't have a percentage exactly. I apologize, but I think it's about $2 to $3 is what my specific rate went up.
$2 to $3?
That's correct.
Okay.
An hour.
Thank you.
Any other board discussion? Is there any comment from our township manager? Tom, do you have anything to add for us as we consider?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to proceed with the proposed 2023 professional fee schedule from the PIC?
Yeah. So that action would be taken at your first meeting in January.
Correct. Okay, so we don't need to do any action.
Yeah.
My
So
apologies.
for this item and then for SSM Group was meant to be informative in nature.
Perfect, thank you.
Right.
Well, no other questions. Tony, thank you very much for
Thank you
presenting
very
to
much
us
for the
this evening.
opportunity.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item D, Spot Stevens and McCoy SSM review of proposed 2023 professional fee schedule. And the explanation will be by Jason Newhart, manager at Spot Stevens and McCoy.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Commissioner Roth, we have not met. I'm Jason Newhart with Spot Stevens McCoy. We are the utility engineer for the Township for Water and Sewer. So kind of on Tony's coattails, we experienced the same situation. Staffing shortages, we had retire outs, trying to replace people at a reasonable rate and pay rate, as well as we really got hit hard this year with benefit increases coming up. I'm sure you have too, and I'm experiencing that. So our increase is more than Pidcock's. We're at almost a 6% across the board. And to answer your question, that is a composite average as well. So some rates, some categories went up. It's not across the board. And I am a tech manager, so I'd be at the highest rate on that sheet.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you're a technical project support? No.
Technical manager. I'd be on the bottom, the last row on the sheet.
Oh, I see. So you went up 5.55%.
Correct. I went up, my rate went up about $6.
Now, I don't know who did the information here, but I appreciate them putting that in.
You see the rate sheet like this?
Well, yeah, but we have it a little bit more detailed.
Okay.
I mean, some of your rates went up 11%.
Some of them did, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I said it's a composite average of roughly 6%, like 5.85 or something.
So in a course of us doing work on a particular project, whatever, you're involved in X amount of that work. How much would an administrative support person do roughly? I'm not looking at.
Well, see, okay, perfect example. So if we're doing a water project for you, bidding out a street and water project, I would be primary in design, but I have somebody helping me, so I wouldn't have all the hours into that.
Right.
So my hours might be 20% of the whole project, to oversee and make sure and divvy the work out. But we have a lot of support staff, surveyors, designers that actually do the hard work behind me. So they're on the lesser rates.
Okay.
So to answer your direct question, though, administrative staff may only be 10% of that.
Okay.
But the hard work and the meat of the project is done by the middle of the road there.
All right, we're around 5-6%. Give or
Correct.
take. Okay, thanks.
So I have a quick question too. If you begin a project and it extends into the new year, will these prices be reflected exactly, or are you grandfathered into what the agreed price?
Great question. So what we do is when we open a project, we open it at the year that it's open.
Okay,
So if we open a project now for 23, it will be at the 2022 rate.
thank you.
Right, yeah. Yeah. What do you want to open for next year, Herb?
Any other board comment? Commissioner
Thank you,
Osborne?
Commissioner Kelly. Jason, I know that I could look this up, after the meeting or, find the information, but my question is this. It's a pretty healthy increase and you spoke to the reasons for it, and none of us who actually do any shopping at a grocery store or anywhere can say we haven't seen increases like this and more. But my question is this. Do you recall offhand what your rate increase was 21 into 22?
I believe we were at 2.5%. We were down around where Pidcock's was.
Okay.
It was much lower. And then I think we experienced a higher need of an increase this year.
To your best recollection, 20 into 21, would it be about
the same?
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was really flat. And then we had a larger one this time.
Okay, thank you.
There's no other board comment. I will again ask our township manager if you have any comment for the board on this.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate forum, but that's a hard number. There's no adjustment.
It's our standard municipal rate sheet. We don't really negotiate at this point.
Okay.
So everybody gets it the same, no matter whatever municipality we serve. It's the same rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, very good, Jason. Thank you for presenting this to us this evening.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Since I asked him the same, may I please ask?
Of course.
You, Tony, the same question. If something is started at the end of the year or in this year and it extends into the end of the year, will the price all of a sudden increase January 1st, or will that price be honored in the year it was started?
Usually, since I would say 80 to 90% of our hours are actually reimbursable hours by developers, we usually have a hard stop that at the end of the year, the rate schedule that is approved by the board is approved starting January 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hodges. All right, moving on to ordinances. Agenda item 7A. Direction and discussion, review of recommendation from the Planning Commission regarding a zoning ordinance text amendment submitted by Shri Mata 4365 LLC. And our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, will be presenting.
So we've prepared two memos. I felt it was important to kind of offer a more broad summary. So that would be the first memo in your packet. The impetus for this text amendment was a request from Shri Mata, which is the Dorneyville Shopping Center, requesting some changes, modifications to the zoning ordinance to help with parking as required for any land development. Currently, they have a land development running through the zoning hearing board as well as this text amendment running concurrently. They did appear at the planning commission with the sketch plan. But at that meeting, they got some feedback and then they kind of stepped back and ran these two parallel paths. Staff, we worked with them on the text amendments, and I'll hand it over to Greg to offer some more details on some of those changes.
Thanks, Dave. Basically, the second and third pages of your packet provide the background information. The second page is primarily of what Dave just went through, the application to date. As I understand it, the applicant did submit an application to the zoning hearing board, and that was reviewed at the November zoning hearing board meeting. I'm not going to go with the date. What was that? Last week. I was on vacation. At which point I believe it was continued to the future, so it was not, no action was taken other than continuance. Simultaneously, along a parallel path, it went to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did review it at their November meeting and recommended adoption of the proposed ordinance by a 4-2 vote with one abstention. The second page of my memo gives background information on parking ordinances in the township, noting that there have been a number of amendments to that since the early 2000s. The most serious one was the 2014 zoning ordinance update, which basically took the shopping center and provided it a single calculation. Previously, it had been part of a coordinated development, which meant you had to basically go through all the uses there, calculate the parking, the off-street parking requirements for each use, and then add up the total for the entire center. 2014, we basically said shopping centers should have one calculation based on the square footage of the entire parcel. So that made it easier in the zoning officer to calculate. It made it easier for the shopping center owners to understand what their parking should be. Unfortunately, times move on. COVID had a big impact on how people shop. And one of the things we learned is that shopping centers themselves are changing and evolving over time. So some of the things that were required to be in a shopping center, those things that we felt made a shopping center, have changed over the years. And one of the things we're discovering is that rather than simply retail sales and service business, personal service businesses that used to form the backbone of our shopping centers has been changing. Restaurants are now added and seeing more and more prominence there. And in a surprise to us, recreation facilities are now seen to occupy a significant part of a shopping center. And you may have noticed that there are gyms and workout facilities now in shopping centers where you hadn't seen them 20 years ago. Those things tend to take up a lot of space, so they occupy a greater proportion of what a shopping center is. So when the applicant came in looking to update the ordinance, we basically discussed this with them and found two tracks. One is to update the definition of shopping centers to include these new uses that are taking up more and more space in a shopping center. And that's the first part of it. That's the first track. The second track is to review the actual calculation itself. Right now, it is a 1 per 225 square foot requirement. One space for every 225 square feet of primary use space within the shopping center. What we did was, and I believe this is what the applicant suggested, was to look at coordinated developments where they still use the same calculation of looking at each individual use, calculating parking separately for each use, and then adding that up. But they do have reductions for size. So the larger the coordinated development, the greater the reduction for size. I believe at 25,000 to 75,000 square feet, we permit a 10% reduction. Over 75,000 square feet, we permit a 15% reduction to account for shared parking. People who go to one tenant in the coordinated development and then also frequent a second before going back to their car and leaving. So that's what we do. The applicant has suggested we incorporate that into shopping centers as well. So that's your second path. The change of the definition is the first path. The reduction for size is the second path. Basically, staff looked at this. We tried to look at all 5 shopping centers that we have in the township right now. Some of which what we call shopping centers no longer meet the definition of shopping centers because they have evolved. And you probably have noticed this. Kmart Center, for one, has a very large tenant in there, which is a fitness facility. So that's a change there. So basically, going with that, we think that staff believes that certainly the zoning ordinance would benefit and all the shopping centers in the township would benefit from that change of definition. Now, we also looked at the parking. Now, that's a little more difficult. We didn't have the resources to actually look at how many spaces are being utilized at any time. For the most part, this is all anecdotal data. I've traveled around the township. Most staff members have traveled around the township, visited these shopping centers at different points during the day and evening, and we notice how full the parking lots are. And for the most part, I think we believe that for the most part, we are overparked, which means we have more spaces than cars generally see during the day. I like to say that I've been out to Crest Plaza during Black Friday and saw plenty of parking still available. So that leads me to believe that at least the parking regulations at the time were very conservative and meant to provide more parking than what is being used now. At the end of the bottom of the second page of my memo, I do bring into 3 additional considerations that I think you should think about while making this decision. The last one I've already touched on, which is the 2-track concept of the definition is 1 track, the reductions for size is another. So keep that in mind as you move along in this process. The other 2, I think, bear some notice. Shopping center operators would be the ones to bear the brunt of any overuse of the parking regulations. If they want to take these things out to the max, basically, and cannot bring in the customer base that they need, their tenants would suffer, and they in turn would then suffer. So they generally are very conscious of how much parking is needed for their tenants and themselves. Just want to point that out. Second thing is what happens if we're not providing sufficient parking? And I think this is an important thing because the zoning ordinance is meant to improve the life of the community, and we want to know what the impacts are. So I do lay out two things you should keep in mind. Is there available parking near the shopping centers that can be utilized if a customer goes into a parking lot and can't find any available parking at all? If there's nearby parking, would they use it? Or would they simply leave and find somewhere else to frequent? I think these are important things because to me, that's the biggest impact of, are we requiring too much parking, too little parking? Because the alternate is if we're requiring too much parking, then we obviously have other impacts. We're requiring parking that'll never be used. There's impervious surface out there. That's increased stormwater management, which is obviously a problem for the developer and the shopping center owner. But the township then has to deal with the MS4 implications of all that stormwater. So there are pros and cons to having too much parking and too little parking. And this is a delicate balancing act. So those are the three issues that I think are very important to be considered when we talk about off-street parking. And then the last thing I did was provide a list of all 5 shopping centers that we have in the township. Column 2 in that table shows their primary use square footage. So you have a good idea of how big they are. The current parking space total is column 3, which also includes the number that they were required to have after variances. And a number of these shopping centers actually have gotten variances in the past from their required parking. The third column is their current required parking spaces. And the fourth column is what would be required if the ordinance is passed as shown tonight. So that gives you an idea of what they have, what they're required to have now, and what they may be required to have if you move this forward. And I will certainly be here to answer any questions that you may have, but I also know the applicant's team is here and they have a presentation for you as well. So
Thank you, Greg.
unless you have any questions specifically right now, I will turn it over to the applicant.
I'll open the floor if the board has any questions at this point.
I do. Do you?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. So you're not asking the board to make any kind of decision this evening?
I am not, no.
Okay. That was the first thing I needed to establish. Okay. So, and I can go back and research and if you say, hey, Brad, go ahead and do that. I've noted the 4-2 to 1 vote of the Planning Commission. So, and I have questions about that because I'd like to understand those who voted no, why no, and also the abstention if there was, just like to understand that as well. But the text changes that you spoke of, were they made after this 4-2 to 1 vote at the Planning Commission?
No, they were proposed to Planning Commission as is.
Okay, so what is before us this evening is exactly what the Planning Commission approved by that vote?
Correct.
Okay. I also saw another developer here in the recent past go to the zoning hearing board as a path versus coming to the Board of Commissioners. And not to get into the details of that, but I say that to build a foundation for my question. So is what is before the zoning hearing board, if the applicant were granted what they're asking for by the zoning hearing board, does that mean that this proposed ordinance change would be kind of not relevant anymore to that applicant?
I could respond to
that. I would leave that to the applicant since I believe that's of whom you're speaking.
Well, not really.
No?
No, generally speaking.
Oh, generally speaking.
Yes.
Well, that would be up to the applicant.
What it'll do is it may not be pertinent to the applicant now, but in the future, if a new tenant comes in and doing the parking calculations, if that definition is changed, that would reflect what we're seeing uses in shopping centers. That would allow them to use those calculations for any new tenants without having to, potentially, without having to go for a variance. And then it also applies to any other shopping center with a new tenant. If we have this change in the definition, they will have that clear, simple parking calculation. As of right now, like Kmart, if we had a new tenant coming into that shopping center, we would have to treat it as a coordinated development, and we'd have to do the calculations that way. So that's one of the things that would happen in the future should that definition be changed. And just another comment on when it was at the Planning Commission, it was brought forward as a package. So one of the things I noted in my memo is you can do one, the definition, you could do both, or you could do neither. So the option is kind of yours as the commission. So I don't know if that was behind some of the no votes at the Planning Commission, but that was one of the things I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of, that you have an option to do one, both, or none.
Okay, thank you. I think I got the answer to my question. Basically, it's one path was chosen at this current time. If the applicant is successful before the zoning hearing board, then the urgency for that particular applicant, let's say, is not as great as it might be for the applicant if they were turned down by the zoning hearing board. I just want to make sure that our board, or certainly myself as a board member, isn't pressured to make an ordinance change without full evaluation. And I'd like to talk with the Planning Commission members myself as far as the reason, why. But I don't want to feel pressured because an applicant has chosen another path. It could be successful, but it wouldn't affect, as far as I'm concerned, I don't feel I need to advance my thinking in order to satisfy an applicant.
As a piggyback to that, oh, I'm sorry, were you finished? So this is for discussion this evening. I guess I'm a little bit confused because I do realize the applicant was at zoning a week ago and the hearing was continued. So what is the purpose of us discussing this at this point if we don't know the resolution of the zoning's hearings?
So part of the zoning, the matter of the text amendment came up at zoning, and it's hard to clarify which one they should be. So that was a lot of the confusion at the zoning hearing board. So there was part of that, and whether should be a legislative change or go through the zoning hearing board. So there was a lot of discussion around that. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing right now. And one thing that can happen, I think, is, and we've done it with other ordinances, is if you're comfortable with it or one part of it, if you want to move forward, we could send it to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission for their comment and then get that back and then move forward like we've done with a couple of the other ordinances, if the board so chooses.
Understood. Go ahead, Commissioner Roth.
I do have a question. This is maybe best directed towards the applicant. I wasn't able to attend the zoning hearing board meeting last week, but whatever your goal is with the redevelopment or adjusted uses of this property is, if you are successful at the zoning hearing board, is this text amendment required in order for you to achieve your goal?
Well, they answer it my way. First of all, my name is William Alchemist. I represent Extreme Auto at the zoning hearing. Reason we went to the zoning hearing, we were here before, and if you recall, you suggested that we do two things. we go to the planning commission with our proposal, and we go to the zoning hearing board with our proposal. We went to the planning commission first, and the planning commission by a vote, I thought it was 5-2. Greg said 4-2. But at any rate, the planning commission approved the application for both of them. If I had made the motion, I would have made separate motions. I would have made one motion with respect to the definition of a shopping center. I would have made another motion with respect to the parking. But the person who made the motion, who was in favor of it, made an omnibus motion for both of them. I suspect that the resolution might have passed if the motion had been, for example, only with respect to the definition of a shopping center. So we were there, and you know what their report was. Then we also went to the zoning hearing board because you also suggested we go to the zoning hearing board. We went to the zoning hearing board, and a couple things happened in the zoning hearing board. We started our presentation, and one of the things that we presented to the zoning hearing board was a study showing that even though the Aldi's market has opened, and even though it had opened for about at least a week, and even though it was Black Friday, this shopping center had more than adequate parking available in the lot. The second thing is, in the course of our presentation to the zoning hearing board, and that's why I wanted to speak earlier, guess what the zoning hearing board said to us? They said, this is a legislative function. We're not going to grant you a variance with respect to something that's in the ordinance. So that's why I think it's very important to amend the ordinance, because we're not going to get relief from the zoning hearing board. And if they're not going to give us relief, the zoning hearing board is not going to give us relief, they're not going to give anybody, any other shopping center relief. So I think it's very, very important that you take a look at this, the ordinance, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The changes that are suggested, I think your staff, I think they have come as close to saying they think it's a good idea. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they think it's a good idea to make these changes in the ordinance. And I think it's a good idea to make the changes in the ordinance. And I hope you will think it's a good idea to make the changes in the ordinance. With respect to the parking, it's the same thing. This shopping center has more than adequate parking. In the past, I represented the other shopping center, I can't think of the name, where the movie theater is. I got two variances from the zoning hearing from the zoning hearing board because they were hopelessly overparked. I mean, under your ordinance, they had needed more parking than they have, but they have enough parking. I did the same thing years ago. None of you were on the board with the Roma Commerce Center, because the under your ordinance, the way the ordinance defined the users, it was impossible for them to rent one of the floors, because the tenants they had to conform to the requirements of the ordinance, they could not rent one floor. And the board at that time changed the ordinance because they had plenty of parking. I think for years, under the ordinance of this township, you require more parking than is needed. So I think you should make some changes in the ordinance with respect to parking, and certainly in the ordinance with respect to the definition of a shopping center. That's it. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying specifically with the feedback you received from the zoning hearing board.
That's right.
Very helpful.
And we didn't finish the hearing. We continued the hearing.
Right.
We continued the hearing in the hope that we come back to the Board of Commissioners we will get a change in the ordinance. Okay?
So, yeah, so thank you for clarifying that. My two concerns with moving forward with a text amendment change. First, as you're well aware, that the township is about to, hopefully in the next few months, approve our new comprehensive plan. And one of the things I certainly would like to do, and I hope my fellow board members would agree, is that we need to open up our entire zoning ordinance, and we need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and make changes that are in keeping with the residents' needs, with small business needs, and also, following the trends of the economy with respect to shopping centers. I think that's a change we need to make. However, that's a process that will likely be done next year. And I think to move forward with text amendment changes now, before the final comprehensive plan has been passed, and certainly before we can seek input from the other shopping centers, their owners, their operators, their tenants, I just don't feel comfortable moving forward with the text amendment change right now. Again, I don't speak for the rest of the board, but I would hope that this is something maybe township staff or the developer could look at when we do a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance. And I think, as is in Greg's memo, text amendment changes to the zoning ordinance apply to the entire township. They apply certainly to those 5 shopping centers listed in the memo, and of course to any future developments that may fall under this use. So I just would like more information. I'd like more input from the community and from the other operators from other shopping centers before we move forward with this.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
I don't think there's any other shopping center in this township which would object to the First Amendment with respect to the definition of a shopping center, because they all have restaurants, they all have fitness centers. So they're in the same position that we are. So I don't think anybody is going to object to that change.
Oh, you're probably right. I would just like to hear their feedback.
Well, I understand that, but all I can say is there's an opportunity here to make this shopping center better than it is, and it might be lost. And I don't run the township, you run the township, but I don't see any reason why I cannot at least ask the planning commission, the county, the Northampton County, Northampton Lehigh County Planning Commission, for at least their views. There's no harm in doing that. They might come back and say it's a very good idea.
I do have a comment. Being that this text amendment would apply to every shopping center township-wide, I'm very reluctant to change it. I believe that requests should be on a case-by-case basis and should not encompass the entire township. I think we have to be careful what we do, what we put into our ordinances, because who knows what we could get. So we have to be careful with that and mindful of that. I do think it should be case by case. And I think we should follow our own process and not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
The comp plan is coming up. The zoning map is going to be changed accordingly. And I think we need to follow those important steps. I do have a question for you, though. How do you said on Black Friday there was more than adequate parking.
That's right.
How do you know that? Did you have an official study done, or?
We had somebody count the spaces, I think, at 4 different times during the day.
Who counted the spaces, sir?
Mr. Joshi himself.
And that is the owner?
The owner, yes.
Okay. With all due respect, that's a long day. That's a lot of work. That's watching a lot of what's going on, and I respect his time for that.
He had a lot of time.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And that's tedious. It's very tedious, and I appreciate what he did. But I'm not sure if that's exactly within his in his wheelhouse, his area of expertise, so to say? I mean, wouldn't it be?
Let me say this. What he did is he went out there, I think four times. How many times? Come up. He went out there himself and he counted the cars in the parking lot. How many times?
Hi, I'm Paresh Joshi.
Right.
I'm the landlord owner. I went 5 times,
Here.
5 days.
Have him speak into the microphone. Thank you.
I went 3 times a day, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 6 p.m. November 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 24th, 24th I didn't go because it's Thanksgiving Day, so everything was closed, 24th. But then Friday, 25th, so I have all chart made up. If people like to see the chart, and so 3 times a day, I went 7 days continuously and count the car. And the maximum count came as 138 parking, maximum on all 7, almost 21 times I counted. 138 car parked maximum. Now we have a 472 required. Actually, existing parking is a 472. With space available 472. Now, right now we have occupancy like 77% because we have some store vacant, like 23, like Apache and Bounce, like 23% vacant. So if you could proportionate, we need about 180 parking. So we are far ahead what we have. I made same study in 2016, I guess, when we applied for bad site near the some part of the park, shopping mall. At that time, I came same kind of calculation. We are far better. If you go walk anytime, you hardly see more than half, maximum peak time is vacant. I think board should consider they should hire somebody, to do this study. But this is for us killing, For 2,000 square feet, I'm applying for. I'm bouncing back 6-7 times in the same hall. Go to planning commission, they send it to board of commission, then go to zoning board. Like the 5th time I'm here. I'm doing all the work, make all legal attorney, engineering, spend money. I spent more than $20,000 on this fee for township. And right now I'm counting myself 138 parking occupied, maximum peak. And if you have 472 parking available right now, I don't know what else board wanted.
Did you do your calculations on your own, or were you
No,
with
I
someone?
went myself. Even though I took my son with me, because
Okay.
he was driving or I was driving, he's counting. So we went to twice. When you go, we can count twice. We get 2 rounds at parking. Maybe few parking, up and down, but maybe couple of percent up or down because people comes and go. So I made study 7-8 days. One day I didn't make because of Thanksgiving Day, 24th. The park at the mall was closed almost. There's no car there. But on Friday, I have like 101 car. But day before Thanksgiving, I get 138 car maximum. That was like 1 p.m. I'm all proof here.
And we're not going to get relief from the zoning hearing board, so. Next. Mr. Osborne's question. Not going to happen. They say it's a legislative function.
I just want to follow up on the comments that we've had tonight. I've been involved with the comprehensive plan update for over 3 years now, first as a citizen and as a commissioner. We've held multiple public hearings and workshops and meetings to begin to gather public comment from our community, from our stakeholders, because we are looking at growth in the township. We are looking at our comprehensive plan to plan for the future. We will be looking at our zoning ordinance because it does need updating, to your point. I appreciate the study that you've done and the information you've brought to us, but we're not just talking about your shopping center. We're looking at the entirety of the township, including new areas we may zone for shopping centers, and what will that impact be for the township. From my perspective, we are at the very end of this process. on Tuesday, we'll probably
Meanwhile-
hold our final meeting for the comprehensive plan to get it all together. So we're right at the cusp of opening it up to public comment and adopting it for the first time in 10, 11 years now, I guess. Got a little bit delayed because of COVID. And then next will become opening the zoning ordinance for review and updating and changing. As we've learned, the needs have changed during COVID, the needs of our community, and what do we want our township to look like for the next 10 years? Where do we want to see growth and how should that go? So I understand the predicament you're in, but I have to look at the township as a whole. And at this time, I don't believe it's the appropriate time for us to change our zoning ordinance when we are so close to opening up the entirety of it to make global changes to the township for the good of the entire township.
Let me ask you, do we need zoning change about shopping, definition of shopping change? Because it's for this calculation or study, we don't need any change in shopping mall or coordinated shopping. I think we try to accommodate because by talking with the township engineers and personals, they want us to go through all these things. That's why we are spending all times and money. But at this point, I don't care about shopping mall or whatever you consider. We have a lot more parking available than it is. I don't think we need zoning change to me.
So basically, you're saying if we did away with and didn't do anything with the shopping center definition,
Yeah.
you'd be happy with the parking situation.
We might be able to convince the zoning hearing board that we have more than that.
Yeah.
Okay. One comment I wanted to make earlier, and this happened to be this morning. I was heading to Philadelphia, and it was on the radio. And I knew this was coming up, but they had a comment on the radio, and I don't know if it was from Bloomberg or who made the comment, but and you said it, Bill, in the sense that you don't want to lose it. But the point is, 1 in 5 shopping centers that have closed for the last 5 years, I'm sorry, 1 in 5 shopping centers are still closed over the last 5 years, and with no end in sight for them to
Right.
open.
they have-
And certainly we don't want to see that
How many
happen.
vacancies, excuse me a second, how many vacancies do you have?
I'm at 23% vacancy.
I'm sorry, 23%?
23% vacancy, 23%. I have that vacancy since between 4 and 5 years. That vacancy not filled. Even after Aldi came, we don't have any inquiry yet. We spent almost over $200,000 just upgrade the entire mall. We repainted and refurnished the whole thing, So, I mean,
But then the comment, I guess I would ask David, you brought it up, and do we move this forward to Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and get their opinion? I mean, we are at the tail end of the comp plan, which we've spent quite a few, meetings on that, and get a sense of where they're at with it, and what their feelings would be.
Yeah, and so with regards to the comp plan, and I've kind of said this during the whole process, sometimes there's things that come up that can be addressed ahead of a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning ordinance. And the very nature of ordinances, changes can be made that reflect what's happening in society. So one of the things that I like that came out of this is the definition change. So I'm very supportive of the definition change because we're seeing it in every shopping center. So that maintains that definition as a shopping center. The piece that gives me pause is the parking reduction, because that parking reduction is applied to coordinated development where you're totaling all the uses, and then you add the reduction. And I don't have any quantitative analysis on this part, but in the shopping center, that reduction is kind of baked into that 1 per 225, is kind of my feeling, but I don't have that qualitatively. But I think, to get back to your question, if we send this to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, I suspect that we're going to get a favorable response for the definition for sure. Because like you heard on the radio, and we've seen in papers that shopping and retail is changing, and we can all acknowledge that. And it's shifting more towards the experiential type experience, so restaurants, health clubs, and things like that. So I think that definition change is a reflection of the times, and is appropriate. And I'm curious to see what the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission does have to say about that, if they've seen it across the region. So that's kind of my take on that part of it.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Attorney Malcolmus, so thank you very much for the information. Actually, what I learned from what you were saying is you're not taking a parallel path. You're not taking a parallel path. You're taking a path that you were directed probably or presumed you need to take this path. So I really appreciate the explanation because I didn't have that background. I'm comfortable personally. I know that this comprehensive plan is an overall vision for the township, but I also can see where the definition of a shopping center will be part and parcel of the comprehensive plan. So let's get a definition of what we mean or want to mean in the future about what a shopping center is, so that when we go to put this piece in the comprehensive plan, we know exactly what we're talking about. So I'm fine with doing two things at once. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're actually complementary. Certainly this is complementary to the comprehensive plan in my view. I have a specific question. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I do want to ask this question. So the Kmart shopping center, Kmart left, as we all know, and there's a very nice fitness club there now. So as establishments within a shopping center come and go, does that, if the definition that we may come up with for a shopping center, if a tenant changes the nature of what that particular building was doing, in this case, Kmart versus, does that then can take a development from inside the definition of an office shopping center to outside or outside to inside? Is that contemplated in the text?
That's exactly why we're changing it, in fact. It's because all 5 shopping centers that I list in that table were at one time met the definition of shopping center.
Right.
However, at least 2 of them anecdotally no longer meet that because the uses have changed and the retail and personal service businesses that were there, which made them shopping centers by definition, have been replaced by restaurants and fitness centers, which remove them from the definition.
And I find parking personally, I find it kind of interesting in a shopping center because I may want to go to, I'll just say an establishment in Crest Plaza, I may want to go to Target. There's no parking spaces at Target, but I'm fine parking somewhere else near some other store and walking to that. Just like a movie theater, you're not going to have any problem in a movie theater before noontime, but at nighttime, they may have the majority of the parking depending on the movie that's being shown. So it's shared parking as I look at it. You just have to be accepting that you walk a couple more parking spaces to get to where you want. And I think that's the value of a shopping center, is you've got a large common area. Now, if in staff's opinion, that number of parking spaces doesn't need to be as great because of the shifting in our society, I'm open to hear it. I do agree with Commissioner Rolfe, though, that we should also hear from the other prospective shopping center owners and get their input. But I don't see a problem with moving forward with what this applicant, Attorney Malcolmus, is asking us to do as we at the same time complete the comp plan. I think it fits right into what we're trying to do in the comp plan. Good time to get the definition down.
And to that, I just want to make sure you understand that if we do move forward with this, change the definition, we will be moving into the review of the zoning ordinance next year. We hope it takes less than a year to do that. We hope the comp plan would take less than 2 years. things happen. So we just want to say that and basically that if we get this definition in place in the next 2 to 3 months, open up the comp plan for review and decide that we're going to streamline all of the uses that we have in the township. And for some reason, shopping centers actually go away and are replaced with some broader definition that has a completely different take on off-street parking. That's still available to us. I mean, we can change these regulations at any time. So I don't think we need to be concerned with, oh, we're close to, getting the comp plan, we need to wait. We can change, we can amend the zoning ordinance at any time as we deem needed. And we haven't done much in the way of amending the zoning ordinance in the past several years. So we have a number of proposed ordinance changes in process right now. So someday soon you may see 1 or 2 more ordinance amendments before you. So I'm just saying that this is something you may want to wait for the comprehensive plan, but I don't think you have to wait for the comprehensive plan. I think you can address issues in your zoning ordinance as they come up and as they're needed, because we will do a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance at one point. So that work will also be done. You can have your cake and eat it too.
I'm interested if our township manager, if I can ask Tom, do you have any insight or recommendation to?
Yeah, the question I would have is, so for the implementation phase of the comprehensive plan, it not only calls for revamping the zoning ordinance or studying the zoning ordinance, it also talks about active transportation, traffic calming, pedestrian safety, many other measures, Act 537 plan update, water and sewer, very, for lack of a better term, a very comprehensive look at many aspects. Okay, so I guess the question is, if not looking at it only in the vacuum of the zoning ordinance, looking at all those other items, what impacts will this have upon that? And do we know the answer to that question at this point?
I would say we don't know the answer. Everything you've outlined is basically demanding of some sort of study and review of the items that we have.
So I guess to follow up with that, if the studies we undertake as part of the implementation phase recommend that we do not undertake this type of change, how do we then unravel what has been done prior to those studies being accomplished?
Exactly that way. We do an ordinance amendment. Because quite frankly, the comprehensive plan has 26 actionable items for implementation. I don't think we're going to do all of them exactly at the same time, so they all end at the same time. Therefore, they're all informing each one of them interconnectedly. I
don't mean to cut you off, but like from a planning perspective, wouldn't it make more sense to do all that first before changing? Wouldn't you want to know all that information before undertaking the zoning change that could impact all those items?
I think there's an advantage to that. However, I think that means we wait many years before we change the zoning ordinance to make it consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think it's quite reasonable to make educated guesses in the zoning ordinance and then come back as we discover things in each one of these other action items and amend the zoning ordinance as needed, because I think we'll be doing that for every other action item that we do first, second, and third. And so by the time we get to the 20th, if we find something that is in the traffic action plan that impacts, for some reason, the stormwater management ordinance, then we would go back and make a tweak to the stormwater management ordinance. So I think this is an interconnected, series of things we're doing.
And I think the other piece of this is I view a lot of these text changes as fine tuning the ordinance and making these micro adjustments, whereas things that come out of the comp plan are more macro. And the studies that Tom brought up, there could be things that come up that make the recommendations to do this fine tuning to pieces of our ordinance. So that information is going to be helpful for making those decisions moving forward on those fine-tuned adjustments. Because one of the things with an ordinance is, as it's in place, if there's problems with it or things that can be improved, you come in and you make those fine-tuned adjustments. So yes, there is value in waiting, but there's also value in moving forward with these fine-tuned adjustments.
Yeah, I like to view all of our ordinances as living documents, and they have to adjust to the situation that's out there.
Any other board comment at this time? Anything from the public? Oh, yes, sir. If you'd come up to the microphone. Attorney Malcolm, may I ask you to step aside? We have a public comment right behind you.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. If you would just give us your name and address, sir.
Yes. Ray Pivus, 1005 Bryan Street in Allentown. I find this very, very, very interesting. It came on a different subject, but to your point, sir, I think and to your point also, the bureaucracy moving, I think these gentlemen here in the retail sector really need help, and they need a quote, living and breathing document that can be adjusted as things go along, where, okay, you make a change to help them, and maybe something doesn't work. And I know there's a quote, comprehensive plan, but that's years, years, who knows how long it's gonna take. The other comment I have is the 5 shopping centers, and I travel like all of you do in the township. You look at that Kmart situation, you could put Walmart in there and still have parking left over. The parking lot across the street where Red Robin is, you have the theater, Red Robin, you have the exercise place moved across the street. Parking's tough in that spot. That's a tough place there. And then you put in all the electric car charging spots that are there, the overflow. I think that it's a subject that really should be addressed by the township. Mr. Osborne, absolutely with you 100%. I think something should be done temporarily to at least divorce these two subjects so you can move it along at a faster clip. The shopping centers in the township, if you go to Lower Macungie, you look, Walmart, we're way overparked here. Too many parking spaces. And that was back in the heyday with Kmart. But to your point with Kmart, think about what will go into Kmart. Probably nothing of that magnitude anymore. It'll be small shops and that there. So just my comment. I wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Anything in the chat? Nothing? Okay. Is there the pleasure of the board to take any action this evening? Any recommendations? Microphone. Yeah.
I think the board should probably give some direction to staff instead of just leaving this open-ended and all of us leave tonight and say, what did we do? So I'd like to do something, either, agree to ask staff to move on a text amendment, which we can then review and discuss in a future meeting, or decide, no, we don't want that.
Or also an option, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission.
Well, that would be part and parcel to have staff continue work, right? So.
Yeah, specifically.
But we'd want to review it before we send it to them. Yeah.
The text.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question, if I may. If you are willing to move it to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, would you want it to go as presented as one ordinance? Or can we break it up and have them comment on the definition and the reduction?
Well, before we open, I guess I'll try to get the sense of what the board's feeling is with this matter before we make that decision. So did you have a comment, Commissioner Roth?
Yep. If it's the pleasure of the board to move it to LVPC, I would suggest move it forward as 2 separate. And my other general comment is if the public comment, if we are to do something in the interim and to take action, whether or not, we're going to look at this ordinance in the next month or 2 or in the early part of next year, I'd like for either township staff or even the developer to get feedback from the operators of the other 5 shopping centers as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm inclined to I agree with your point. We definitely need more feedback from and input from the community and the other stakeholders, the other shopping centers. But, Greg, you mentioned if we were to make this text amendment 6 months from now, we could change it. I just don't see the wisdom and I know that I personally, on planning and as well as a commissioner, we have had other developers before us to ask for changes, and we have put them on hold because of the comprehensive plan, because it will envelop the entire township. And to be consistent, I don't feel at this time, unless we can look at the entirety of the township and its impact on it, including future shopping center designated areas that we haven't even considered zoning yet, which may come out of this plan. I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves, and it makes sense to wait to do this as one plan, and that if we need to accelerate the review of the zoning ordinance, certainly that's something I'm sure we can discuss with our administration. But that's where I'm leaning.
Kind of to piggyback on that, I think the action requested, one of them was to deny moving forward. I don't think that's, in my opinion, something we should do tonight, but I do think we need to put this matter on hold until we gather more information. And as Commissioner Kelly said, if that means we accelerate changes to the zoning ordinance as a result of the comp plan, so be it. I think that would be beneficial to the township and the developer as well.
Commissioner Hodges?
For the reasons I stated before, I feel we should follow our own process, not get ahead of ourselves, gather more information. I am not in favor of changing the text amendment tonight.
Oh, I am. To answer your question, Greg, split it. That's what I would think we should do. That way we have a clear definition of both.
I'll make a motion, but I'd like to, so that we have clear definition for staff, clear direction. I guess without challenging, because I don't mean to do that, but if for those who may not approve a motion to allow staff to prepare text and present it to us and have us discuss it, and would like more information, I guess also to accompany that, I would want to make sure that those commissioners who may not approve this motion are clear in the information they're seeking and how it fits into either accepting or ultimately not accepting a text change. I think we need to be clear. What I did here is get information from other operators. I support that. I don't see why we can't do multiple things at the same time. You never make a decision without all the information you have. But if we're not going to make any positive step forward, and a text change is not a hard thing to do, and then you present it and we talk about it in addition to the other information that other commissioners may want. And if it's all there, then we have it. So with that, I will move that we, as a board, direct staff to present to the board in a future meeting in the near future, a text change that they support and would like us to consider.
Second.
Okay, so motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
My only comment would be, while I do think we need to continue this discussion, and I certainly hope the developer comes back to us, I'm not prepared to move forward with it at this time. I mean, I think if we are going to allow staff to continue working on this, there would have to be parameters set. That way, a text amendment for advertisement doesn't come back to us at the end of this month or next month.
I would agree with your statement. Any other comment? Okay, all in favor of said motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion does not carry.
What is the next direction for us?
But you
What is the
still
next
have
direction for us?
your
I'll explain
Go
to
ahead,
you.
please.
zoning hearing board
I
continuance.
suspect I will not live long enough to see the new zoning ordinance.
Well, I hope that that's not true, and we will get to work on it
I
as soon
think
as possible.
I think that's a fact of life. It is what it is.
So let me
Thank you.
ask you one question before I go in some direction. Without change of definition of shopping mall, definition explain the parking requirement for each definition, coordinated or shopping center. They concern with the parking space, both. Without changing definition, we are still under the needed parking. We are a lot more than 50% under the parking. So we may not need to change the definition of shopping center. I mean, we are bouncing back so many times for one simple reason, which we don't have to actually. We met the staff almost this last year and a half. And every time we met, and that direction was still, Mr. Adams says that we should request Board of Commission to change the definition of shopping mall. Not because of us, because all other shopping mall. But at this point, I don't care about other shopping mall. I care my shopping mall. We are a lot more parking required. I mean, have the requirement. I don't know we have to go through anything like this.
Well, thank you for your comment, and we certainly will look into this when we move forward with our township plans. Did you have a comment? Sure. Come to the microphone. Give us your name and address, please, sir.
Hi, I'm Vikas Joshi. I'm Mr. Joshi's son. I graduated from Parkland High School. Sat on some of the Parkland School District advisory boards as well. And I also grew up at the Howard Johnson's across the street where my dad built. And my father and mother literally worked there and kind of lived in the back while we were growing up. So high school, that was my job on the weekends. I used to go to that Subway across the street in this Dorneyville shopping center. I used to go every single day because I was vegetarian. There was no place to eat. So I used to end up going there, and I used to tell my dad, this place is so empty. I mean, how can they survive? You know, there was I think there was a Lane Co there, then there was a Bottom Dollar came in. The mall was still empty. Like parking, it looked vacant even though 100% was occupied. And he was jogging in the neighborhood, which he lives right around the corner. And he bumped into some gentleman there saying that stock market's going to crash. Put it into real estate. So he bought the Dorneyville shopping center. But shortly after we bought it, the Bottom Dollar closed down. They were still they were dark, but the parking was 90% vacant. I was there every day, going to that Subway every single day. And we did sell Howard Johnson's, but we moved up the street to the 4 Points. So we redeveloped that Comfort Suites, which was running down. We took it over. We made it into a 4 Points. I still go down to that shopping center every day for lunch, and it's still empty. So, like my father mentioned, we've been spinning our wheels for about a year plus on this, and we're bouncing back, between PC, BOC, and zoning. We're just looking for some clear understanding. We're not, we worked 4 years, and I'm going to tell the whole story. We worked 4 years to get Aldi to come back. Okay. I mean, it was gut wrenching. So we got them to come back. They're actually paying the same rent as the old Bottom Dollar. The beautiful looking store, but we've really financially made no progress. And so we're pretty much at still step one. We put in a couple $100,000 to make the shopping center look beautiful. Now, as a member of, growing up here in South Whitehall and in Parkland School District, we decided to locate here and stay here permanently. Both my boys graduated from Parkland just recently, and we're trying to bring the whole township up. I mean, we spent every penny we had in the old comfort suites to make it a 4 Points. We're doing the same thing over here, but all we need is clarity. The sign on the pylon says Dorneyville Shopping Center. Why the hell are we called the coordinated development? So I'm just trying to emphasize, if we can use a little bit of common sense, which I know all of us have, but I mean, that's just a one sticking point. I mean, and I respect the comprehensive development. I studied down at Hopkins in real estate development, so I was part of a lot of it down there. But just having that brief understanding, if somehow your team has worked very hard, and we've worked alongside with them, and I mean, we don't want all this to go to waste. And it's pretty much just changing a small definition, and practically it's not just our shopping center, it's going to benefit the other shopping centers too, right? I think this was publicly, there's a public notice for this. If they were seriously concerned about this, they would have attended, right? And they would have voiced their opinions. But I think, they would have been here if they were going to object. So see if we can have your help, and if we can kind of stream this along a little bit. So again, it's called Dorneyville Shopping Center. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your comments. We will certainly take them under advisement as the CD department works through our comp plan and zoning updates. Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item is item B, direction discussion, possible amendment to the Parks and Recreation Board ordinance, and the explanation for this agenda item will be by our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm requesting direction and discussion from the Board of Commissioners, followed by a motion to remit the enclosed draft ordinance to the Township Solicitor for a legal review, if deemed appropriate by the Board. To give background on this ordinance draft, the First Class Township Code reads as follows. Section 3010, park or recreation boards, when established, shall consist of 5 or 7 persons who are residents or property owners in the township, and shall be appointed by the Board of Commissioners. The members of the Park or Recreation Board shall serve for terms of 5 years or until their successors are appointed, except that the members of the board first appointed shall be appointed for staggered terms, so that no more than 2 members shall expire annually thereafter. Our existing code at section 1711 currently does confirm that there are 7 members of the Park and Recreation Board, 2 of whom shall be appointed by the Parkland School Board, and the terms are actually right now 4 years as set forth in the ordinance. So our ordinance right now is not consistent with the First Class Township Code. I've prepared an ordinance that would then align the procedures of the township with the First Class Township Code. In looking at the current composition of the Park and Recreation Board, some of the term members their term has actually expired many years ago, but the way they were appointed allows them to continue to serve until such time that a successor is appointed. So this would, if the board is inclined to move forward with the ordinance amendment, it would give the board the opportunity to stagger the terms in the manner required by the First Class Township Code, so that no more than 2 members will expire annually thereafter. So basically, I wanted to get the direction and the feedback from the board as to whether you're inclined to move forward with this ordinance.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for bringing this to our board for consideration this evening and for preparing. Are there any board comments? Oh, sure.
It sounds to me, Tom, that what you've presented, we should be doing. It's what the First Class Township calls for. So
Yes.
I don't see why we should have much of a discussion on it when it's what we should be doing and should have been doing. So thank you for, as Diane said, bringing it to our attention.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to make a comment that I do agree with the staggering of the terms, just for the continuity of the board. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Roth. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed.
So go ahead, Commissioner Roth.
My only comment would be, Again, thank you, Tom, for putting this together and for staggering the terms. I just think as a board and as a township, certainly in the last 10 years, we kind of fell into a rut of not reappointing or appointing new members to volunteer boards and commissions in a timely manner, not just with Parks and Rec, but I know with other boards as well. So I would hope that this board would seek to continuously keep note of members of our volunteer boards and commissions who are in need of reappointment. That way we don't have a majority of members of any volunteer board and commission whose terms have expired 4 to 6 years in the past, as is the case with Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Good point. Commissioner Osborne, sorry, I
thank
skipped over you.
So, Tom, I'm just going to start out with a question. We have, I'll say, similar issues, not the same necessarily, but similar issues with many of our other volunteer boards. Can I ask what triggered the choice of Parks and Rec to be the first one to go after? And maybe that's the first one to present for amending.
Yeah, there was no, honestly, there was no logic per se. It would seem the one that I had reviewed the first class township code, and that was the first one that I found to be inconsistent. Some of the other boards, while we have the same issue, they're not necessarily inconsistent with the first class township code. So I wanted to pick the low hanging fruit in the sense that this one was the one that the terms and the way two of the appointments were listed in the current code were not consistent. So I felt that was more pressing than some of the other issues.
Perfect. Thank you. I really like that. And being a policy person, I like the fact that this is policy. And I like the fact that we're addressing those policies that we have or don't have that may not be consistent, with the township code as well. I have a question though. So I'm reading on page 4 of 5. It's highlighted, at least in our document, about membership. We currently have 2 commissioners that were appointed to the Parks and Rec Board. This, as I'm reading this, I don't see where 2 commissioners or any commissioners are part of that board in this membership definition. Am I looking at that right? Page 4 or 5 under membership.
You're saying about the elected Board of Commissioners?
The makeup, it says consists of 7 residents.
Correct.
But I don't see where the allowance or requirement that commissioners are part of that board as well.
Oh,
I'm missing that.
That's not a requirement. It's just that the commissioners have to appoint.
But we appointed 2 of our own members to that board. Is that?
No, you appointed. So I'm sorry, let me clarify. 2 of the members were appointed in the past by the Parkland School Board, which you corrected last year or earlier this year, I believe. So the way the ordinance is currently written, it says the Parkland School Board appoints 2 members, which would not be consistent with the first class township code because only the Board of Commissioners can appoint. So you did correct that issue previously because the current members are all residents of the township, but you have to take out the language that the school board appoints them because that's not permitted under the first class township code.
So there's no commissioners serving on the Park and Rec Board.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
On that same page, I don't know if this is something that we would consider amending now or if there's another avenue to do it. The 3rd paragraph states that the board shall file an annual written report making specific recommendations to the commissioners regarding the establishment and improvement of park and rec facilities, the need to equip, et cetera. And then the following paragraph says a separate annual report shall be filed with the commissioners setting forth an analysis of existing community rec and park areas and facilities, et cetera. When I read this, I wondered, should we specify shall be presented to the Board of Commissioners by the 1st of February? I mean, it's a little bit nebulous that it's something that should be done annually. I don't think it's ever been done, to my knowledge, at least in my recent history.
In recent history, I don't believe so.
So I just wondered if that would be something we could build into this so that it would be a timetable that everybody would easily understand when they read this, and would have a streamlined guidance to the Park and Rec Board so they would know, what they need to do.
I guess the first question to the board is, do you want the Park and Recreation Board doing this report, or would you rather rely on staff to do this report as needed and to update it on an ongoing basis as opposed to an annual report? That's just a question at this point.
Well, you've raised a good question in my mind, because our comp plan, we've talked about, it's a 10-year plan, but we periodically should review it and make sure that we're keeping up with it. Does it need any changes? I think the same thing with our township parks. I think it's a good idea to have communication between our advisory board and the governing body, so we know what they're doing, but someone should be keeping the elected body up to date with the state of our recreational facilities and the potential needs that the community has. And I'm not sure if that's staff or Park and Rec Board, but.
Or maybe a combination of both,
Combination.
working with both.
If I may, my suggestion would be that Parks and Rec staff prepare a report, and then obviously give the Parks and Rec Board time to review and add input, maybe at their last regularly scheduled meeting of the year, and then staff can submit the report to the Board of Commissioners.
Is that language then, Tom, that we could work on those 2 paragraphs, because they're pretty specific as to the direction of the Park and Rec Board to make reports to us?
Yeah, if the board as a whole is okay with me making those changes as deemed appropriate, I will do that, and we'll come back next meeting or next month. And then what I'd like to do is send it to the solicitor for review following those changes, and then we'll have a motion to advertise after that's been conducted.
Excuse me, Jacob, you said the last meeting of December?
They don't meet in.
What I meant is, I know they don't meet in December, but
That's why I was just checking with you.
Maybe have the report given to Parks and Rec Board members at their last meeting of the year, which I believe would be November.
Okay.
And then the report could be given to the Board of Commissioners by the end of the calendar year. That makes sense.
And my other question on page 4 further down is officers. And it states the members of the Park and Rec Board shall elect their own chairperson and secretary, et cetera, and serve for a period of 1 year. I know other advisory boards have a limit to how many terms their chair can have. And I want to just throw that out for discussion to the board. Do we want to build in language that a chair should serve for maybe 2 terms and then have someone else serve, or leave it up to the discretion of the Park and Rec Board?
I think you should leave it up to the discretion of the Park and Rec Board. We have enough problems getting people to be on these boards. If somebody's willing to be on a board and continue to serve in that capacity, that keeps the continuity going within the board. And I see no reason why they shouldn't continue with that.
That's a good point, but I think maybe we should add here that they should hold an election each year, even to reappoint.
Oh, yes. No, they should hold an election each year.
Yeah, I think it's implied in there, but we can add the clarification that they would essentially have to reorganize each year.
I think it would be helpful to have the language there, just as an update, just my opinion. Any other board comments on this? Any public comment? Okay, Tom, do you have what you need from us?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Moving on to resolutions, agenda item 8A, Parkland Manor Phase 4 Senior Living Land Development Plan, approval of alternate form of security for public improvements. And I will call on our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, to present.
Yes, so this is for the Parkland Manor, the old racket center along Crackersport Road. They're requesting a resolution to change banks for their security. And I believe the applicant is here to elaborate.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever. I'm Joel Weiner. I'm the attorney for Crackersport Racquetball LP, which owns Parkland Manor. Our request this evening is that we were before the board, we were granted permission to have M&T Bank issue a letter of credit their place of presentation of that letter of credit is in Baltimore. We then the process switching items. We're moving from M&T Bank to Morgan Stanley Private Bank. Morgan Stanley is the brokerage firm that's got God knows how many offices locally, but their letters of credit are presented in Baltimore, not at the same place in Baltimore though. The ordinance that allowed us to and let me go back. There is an ordinance in the township which requires that when financial security is placed in the nature of a letter of credit, the place for presentation of that letter of credit must be within 60 miles of the township office, or approval of the township board must be given for a greater distance. We were given that permission with requirements that included, should the township wish, it could send a representative down to the place of presentation, and the cost for that person to go down there, stay overnight if needed to present it there, and come back would be a cost to be borne by the applicant and could be part of the draw against that letter of credit. That was a reasonable request, one that we granted, one that was reasonable, was agreed immediately and went on that way. Now, the letter of credit can be presented for, and let me go back, I'll go back another step. A letter of credit is security that's given. The letter of credit form comes on a specific printed item. It has that fancy bank paper. You can't copy it. You can't just give out copies of it. When you want to make a draw, this is a standby letter of credit. So only if the developer has not performed, doesn't do what they're supposed to, or if the letter of credit was not going to be renewed and there was no replacement, would you make a call on the letter of credit. To make a call on the letter of credit, you do the site draft in accordance with the letter of credit, and then you take that original letter of credit together with any amendments that are done as you reduce the financial security, and that whole package goes down to the bank and tell the bank to please pay us the full amount left on it or whatever is appropriate. The original letter of credit goes to the bank. You can't say, here's a copy, I'll email it to you and I'll hold the original, because it's a document that they must get. The original must make its way to the place of presentation. Now, the letter of credit form does, as the solicitor requested, allow for FedEx or UPS, the two, they say nationally recognized courier, which are basically FedEx and UPS today, for that they could take it, send it down. Our letter of credit's only 165,000, so not a big deal. You could send it there. If we were 1 million, maybe you'd want to have somebody drive it down because you wouldn't want FedEx to possibly lose it. Hopefully there's nobody here who'll take offense, but in any event, that's a possibility. What we have with us tonight is the ordinance was great years ago when you could walk down Hamilton Street and hit 4 bank presidents within 2 blocks. Today, we've got maybe 3-4 banks that are headquartered within 60 miles of the South Whitehall. Virtually all the letters of credit are presented at a money center, which today is Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington, New York, and other places, God knows where. Our request tonight is 2 things. Number one, to allow us to have a presentation not at the M&T office in Baltimore, but at the Morgan Stanley Private Bank National Association office in Baltimore, where they receive letter of credit draws, which is from one side of Baltimore to the other. My second request is, because in all likelihood we may switch banks again, just given the nature of what's happening in the world today, is that we also have the ability that we could change to another bank within a 200-mile radius without coming back to the board. The form of the letter of credit still must meet the satisfaction of the solicitor, and there's specific formats for that. But again, the request is that in the future, just looking at drawing the 60-mile radius, it doesn't include Baltimore, it doesn't include New York, it doesn't include Washington, D.C., it doesn't even include Wilmington. So basically, you've got 3 banks that we've got headquartered in our area, and beyond that point, we're pretty much out of banks at this point. So that's why my request is twofold. Number one, immediately to let us go to Morgan Stanley Private Bank National Association at the address specified in Baltimore. And number 2 is on a replacement that it could be any place within a 200-mile radius. Again, my thinking of 200 miles, not that it was some great magic, but someone could drive there from here in the morning, drop it off and still come back home. We weren't flying to go somewhere anywhere in that regard. Again, with the same conditions as the solicitor had before, that the cost of presentation, if desired to be made personally, is an obligation of the applicant and may also be a part of the draw request if made. That's our request this evening. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. I'll open up to the board for questions. Commissioner
Yeah,
Osborne.
thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Solicitor Zader, what we heard is presentation from Attorney Weiner. Is all of it consistent with your conversations, and are you okay with this?
There's nothing that Attorney Weiner stated that's inaccurate. I would add that historically, traditionally, letters of credit had to be presented in person. Not necessarily the case today, but as he pointed out, there's always the concern about a loss in the Federal Express or UPS process. So that always needs to be taken into account. And I can tell you that drawing on letters of credit is rare. In the last 30 years, I've been involved in it 2 or 3 times tops. Interestingly, most recently was in the last 6 months, involved with another client. And we were able in that instance to coordinate with the bank directly that if there was a loss through the FedEx process, they would make good on it anyway. But that's not something that typically will go into the letter of credit itself. That was a matter of back-end coordination. So all that said, I have no problem with what's being suggested. I would have an asterisk, and if I think there may have been discussion between staff and my office on this point, but with regard to the second request of Attorney Weiner, that any banking institution located within a 200-mile radius be acceptable in case there's a change. I would want it to be clear that we're talking about a federally or state chartered bank whose net worth picture is deemed adequate by the township. That said, I'm not sure if staff has any additional questions or comments on that particular point.
I think the concern from staff, and I know Tom and I have talked about it, and Tom has some opinions as well, is with regard to any bank. I mean, it goes through the process and it usually goes to attorneys, but the potential for it to not come before the board, and the board is not aware that the possibility of going to these other banks is the concern from staff with regard to the any bank clause.
What would be the recommendation of staff and the township manager, that it come back to the board if there were a change?
Yes.
Thank you.
With all due respect, I would suggest that if we go, the point that we have is that again, the restriction is there's a qualification of bank issue is one point and a radius is the second. There is no question. I agree with Mr. Zader's comment that the bank must be a federally registered bank of sufficient financial capability. You don't want Joe's Bank and Trust, who has a net worth of 12 cents, to go issue the letter of credit. But if in terms of it, we were looking at, my point was going to the distance area, not going to the quality. The quality of the letter of credit should be exactly as Mr. Zader stated, because anything less than that would probably not meet the requirements of a letter of credit for the township. So I'm looking in the distance area to address how far we have to be. So if we got replaced with, say, Chase Manhattan Bank, and it said replace in Manhattan, I would not have to be back before you. Or if I end up with a bank who's got a third office in Baltimore and go, guess what? I was north, I was south, now I'm in Center City, Baltimore, but I'm back again. That's what I'd like to avoid. But I believe that the request is that the bank that we have otherwise meet the township requirements for letters of credit. And I believe, is there a township specification, Mr. Zader, directly?
There is no specific net worth requirement or due diligence requirement. It would be looked at on an ad hoc basis. And while you've addressed the concern I raised about the caliber of bank and the financial wherewithal of the bank, I believe the point made by the township manager is a different one. And that's really understanding knowledge of the Board of Commissioners. And my comment does not really address that.
I think, again, as I said, we're back here tonight because I'm in Baltimore within 5 miles from itself. And if I get another guy in Baltimore because it was specifically at this address. But if I look realistically, if the bank's in New York is its place of presentation, the letter of credit, and most banks do not take letters of credit at the branch office. So for example, you could not go to the Chase Manhattan branch at 7th and Hamilton, or in our case we had here, we could not go to the M&T branch in South Whitehall because the letters of credit specifically could not be taken in at a branch. One of the reasons is because there's a limited period of time that they have to review and fund against it, and they don't want to just have it get lost to the teller's desk. So that's why I said, that's why our request is that the letter of credit issuer otherwise be qualified, but the place of presentation be allowed to not require us to come back here if we're with a creditworthy bank.
If I could just jump, I think a question that might be helpful for the board, and I don't have enough experience with it, and perhaps Joe can shed some light on it, is for those letters of credit that are within the 60-mile radius, how often do bank changes happen, and how often are letters of credit being changed? Because our concern is, if it's something that happens all the time within the 60-mile radius and it's handled at the staff level, that may shed some light on how many times potentially people could come back with that 60-mile concern.
Dave, if I understand your question, I'll try to answer it. I cannot recall ever seeing an issued letter of credit that has the typical evergreen provision, meaning it continues year after year, it rolls over unless there's a notification by the bank of it being terminated. I can't recall ever receiving a notification that the location of the site draft, the delivery of the letter of credit for payment, has changed. It could happen, I don't recall seeing it. But I think what Attorney Wiener's really talking about is not that. What he's talking about is if his client decides to change banks and has a new issuer. And that's really a matter of discretion with the developer, the property owner, not a matter of banking.
In the 20 plus years that I've been here, I've dealt with this since almost day one. I would say between 5 and, well, probably around 5% of the letters of credit have changed banks within the project's life. It's not very common. Usually the first letter of credit that a project brings in stays with it the life of the project. It is rare, but it does happen that they change banks. But like I said, it's rare.
One thing I can add, not to belabor the point, but I have seen where an issuing bank merges with another bank. And now that bigger bank will change the location for the draw because it's a different bank in effect. That does happen on rare occasion. We've certainly seen a slowdown of those mergers, but not necessarily over.
It's been one of the problems that as our banking world has changed in the Lehigh Valley and we don't have the same stability and some of the bigger banks have merged and decide not to like to do business here, you are finding developers having to go switch banks and go to different stuff. So where, again, if this was in certain developments, like if we're putting up a shopping center and we're ready to break ground, then generally you have all that in place. Where it's here and it's something that's going to get started, as you go to switch and you find banks' appetites change over life, that's where you are having it come in. Is it a routine item? Not necessarily. In the old days, it wasn't. In the current banking world, stability among the banks and among the bankers is something that unfortunately is no longer common. So it is, I agree with Greg. In my experience, it's not something that had been happening a lot, but I am seeing that as bankers leave and as mergers go on, as people switch banks, more and more you're finding that if you want to stay with your banker, you're at a new bank.
Any other board discussion?
I do have a question. I don't know, maybe Tom, you could answer it for me, or Attorney Zader, or one of the staff. Is it a common practice to go outside that 60-mile?
I don't know that many municipalities have that provision. Some do, some don't. So I wouldn't call it necessarily a common practice. One of the follow-up, not specific to this particular resolution, but one of the follow-up questions I had to the board was, do you want staff and I to look at this provision with attorney's aid to make sure that it's still applicable, that we should still have the 60 miles in effect? Because it seems as though there's a number of waivers that come before the board for this matter, and then maybe there's a different way of approaching this.
I would think it would be wise to take a look at that and bring it back to the board.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
So
But that's separate from this isolated request.
Separate.
Yeah.
So thank you, Commissioner Kelly. So just for clarification, I have no problem, the 60 miles to 200 miles. That to me is, especially in this banking world, it's typical. So, but I am wondering, I'm struggling now because of the conversation, does this resolution have baked into it that we would be allowing, let's say in this case, Attorney Weeder and his client to change to any bank without coming before the board, which then in turn would allow any other developer to go to any bank without knowing the financial feasibility, the board having no understanding at all. So I'll stop with that as a question. Does this resolution, if passed as worded, open up that door?
I think if you allow the 200 mile for any bank as written, yes. I don't know that it would open up for all. I think it would be specific to this instance.
Oh, this resolution then is not any kind of ordinance change. This is specific.
Correct. This is specific to this developer.
And for this developer, I would accept a requirement that the bank otherwise meet the South Whitehall Township standard requirements. The same as if we found a bank within the 60-mile radius, I would expect that you wouldn't take a bank with 12 cents net worth. It would still have to meet the township's net worth, even if it was located down the street from here.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So the intent, the request was not to change the township, not to change the requirements of the township as to qualification of the bank. It is solely to change the requirement that the qualified bank have a place of presentation instead of within 60, within 200 miles. So with that clarification, I do appreciate, I hadn't thought about that part of it. I was just looking at the distance being my limitation and thinking that, of course, it had to meet the qualification. But as it's been brought out, without that qualification, we could end up with Joe's Bank and Trust. So that's not the intent.
Any other comment?
So I agree with the 200-mile radius. I have no problem with that at all. However, changing banks, I do think you don't want to set a precedent for other developers to just keep changing banks as well. I think for accountability reasons, if a bank is changed, we should be notified. And I would agree, like I said before, to revisit that 60-mile and maybe changes with that. So those are my feelings, and thank you.
Commissioner Hodges, and I agree with your comment. Yes, as we heard, this is specific to this resolution, but every time we approve something like this, we have possibly begun to set a precedent. So I think it should be really clear, at least in my mind, that this is very specific for a specific reason and doesn't have application beyond anything else beyond this. But we do have to be careful about setting precedent.
I would agree. There's no other comment from the board. Is there any public comment? So before us, we have a resolution of the Parkland Manor Phase 4 Senior Living Land Development Plan approval of alternate form of security for public improvements. I want to clarify before we take a vote on this, or giving them approval to change banks within the 200-mile that we've already granted them. Is that also tied to his second request, which was to move banks around in there without coming back to the board?
Yeah, I believe the way it's written now, it wouldn't require them to go back, Dave, unless I'm looking at that wrong.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
My request, the request for the letter of credit would be that I don't know that, as I understand, if I come back within 60 miles, I wouldn't have to go to the board. It would go to staff on that. So we would ask the same thing, that whatever requirements exist to have a change of bank within the 60 miles is the same requirement for the bank, but within the 200-mile radius. So if it's a certain net worth, a certain, FDIC regulated of, whatever capacity, that requirement all has to be made. Again, if we moved to American Bank, which is a mile away from here, American Bank would qualify on mileage, but would also qualify on fiscal capability. If, on the other hand, we go to Chase Manhattan Bank, clearly they'd qualify on financial capability, but their place of presentation would be outside. So the request that we have is the 200 miles is without coming back to the board to ask for a waiver of the 200 miles, but not changing the board's then existing financial capabilities of a bank. So if you decide that you publish a $22 million, some net worth, whatever standard, that's a requirement we have to meet, and would be whatever the LC requirements are at that time.
So to clarify, this is written to give approval for Morgan Stanley Bank.
Correct.
It goes beyond that.
But it goes, yes.
It's
Yeah.
Morgan Stanley Bank, and then the request would be Morgan Stanley Bank specifically at this address in Baltimore, and also part two, a bank of financial capability as determined by the township, which has a place of presentation within 200 miles. So I would suggest adding to the language that I had there, a bank which meets the financial capability of the South Whitehall Township under its current community development guidelines.
And I would respectfully add, also subject to approval of the township solicitor,
Yes.
if the board's inclined as well.
So
And I think was fine, because I know that when this came up, the original Morgan Stanley letter of credit, Joe's office did have a request that it use Pennsylvania law instead of New York. So there are things in the board that the LC should need approval from the solicitor's office.
But just to clarify how I am comfortable voting and approving to allow the change to Morgan Stanley Bank, I believe that if you move to another bank in that 200-mile radius, that it should come back to the Board of Commissioners for our certainly our knowledge and our approval.
If that's the case, then in the proposed resolution, I believe in paragraph 1, Romanet sub 2 would be eliminated.
So I would make a motion to approve with the removal of paragraph 1, number 2. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second that.
Okay, any other board discussion? Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Yes.
Commissioner Osborne.
I'd like to ask the applicant, Attorney Weiner, the proposed change to this. Now, I know this is our board's decision, but if we were to approve this motion, does this substantially satisfy your client situation and you walk away this evening being happy, or is this of no value to you?
Okay, it is of value to me because it allows the substitution of a letter of credit, so the financial security stays in place.
Right.
The part it doesn't do is it means if we switch banks, I'm back here again and we go through this whole thing again. So I was looking at something that, as I said, we're here tonight because I had an address in Baltimore and I moved to another address in Baltimore, and unfortunately, the odds are that if we go to the bank, Morgan Stanley is not out doing construction mortgages. So the odds are I'll be at a third bank at some point. But again, if the board wants us to come back, then that's where we'll be.
Okay. And Tom, you had proposed language which would give our solicitor the authority, let's say, to make a decision based on the switch of banks and not come before the board.
Well, initially, my recommendation was to have it come before the board, but I was listening to the discussion, and I thought it was going in such a way that you were allowing the 200-mile radius. If you were to do that, then I would have that language to the township solicitor. However, the motion on the floor is that not to allow that. So that goes back to my original recommendation.
Okay.
I could offer one additional suggestion if it's of interest to the board, and it might be of slight help to Attorney Weiner. If the board is otherwise satisfied with Morgan Stanley Private Bank National Association, should that particular bank change locations and be within 200 miles, perhaps that's where they wouldn't have to come back to the board. So if they move to a different office in Baltimore, or move to Philadelphia, or move to Wilmington, it's still the same bank.
I would be agreeable to that.
That would be
I agree.
helpful. At least it solves the immediate problem because we're trying to get a bank replaced now to get a replacement letter of credit. And obviously, when they go decide to build, we'll probably be back at that point. Who the construction lender is, security.
So as a follow-up, Attorney Zader, is there some language that you would suggest we add to paragraph 1, section small I, to
I
reflect?
could, certainly, Commissioner Kelly. In the last line of subparagraph 1, where it reads right now, street, comma, Thames Street Wharf, semicolon, or, I would get rid of the semicolon or, and I would replace it with, or other address of Morgan Stanley Private Bank, comma, National Association, located within 200 mile radius of the township offices at 4444 Walbert Avenue, South Whitehall Township, Pennsylvania.
Very good, thank you. So I will withdraw my initial motion and make a motion to approve as stated by, with the addition of the language by Attorney Zader and removing paragraph 1, small I.
I want to ensure that he signs the acceptance of conditions as outlined now.
Or basically that it's Morgan Stanley at this address in Baltimore, or at another, or if it moves to an office within 200 miles.
Correct.
Okay.
Of Morgan Stanley.
Morgan Stanley, if the Morgan Stanley Private Bank moves its place.
Correct.
And to the board's earlier comments about precedent, this is time sensitive because this letter of credit is set to expire later this month.
Understood.
So that gives you more authority, in my opinion, or in terms of not setting a precedent because it's isolated to this case by case issue.
Very good, thank you. So I have made that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Moving along to agenda item B, we have a resolution approving sewer planning module, My Salon Suites Village West Shopping Center, and I will call on our utility and MS4 coordinator, Mike Elias. Good evening.
Good evening, commissioners. My Salon Suites is re-tenanting 2 retail spaces at the Village West Shopping Center, totaling 6,500 square feet for a spa/salon. Their sewer flows were calculated at 713 gallons per day or 3.2 EDUs of sewer allocation. So we are requesting a resolution approving 3.2 EDUs of sewer allocation for the My Salon business.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. And I reviewed the calculations. It's minimal as far as the capacity that we have available still. So it's the recommendation of you and the department to approve
Yes.
this matter. Okay. Are there any board questions on this matter? Anything from the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve said resolution?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item C, we have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the township manager to execute a utility reimbursement agreement with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for the Highway Improvement Project of State Route 309, Section 12M. And I'll call on our township manager, Tom Petrucci, to explain.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. First of all, I just want to make sure that I clarify that I'd be signing the resolution, but the credit for this goes to Director of Operations Herb Bender. He was able to work out with PennDOT whereby the township will only be paying 25% of the costs associated with relocating and adjusting our sewer and water. At this point, we're only seeking approval for sewer, but for the highway improvement project of State Route 309. So I want to thank Herb for his efforts in this. That was a tremendous action. We don't know all of the costs thus far, but thankfully we will now be only paying 25% of those costs as opposed to all of them. So while legally I'm signing it, I have to give the credit to Herb. With that, I'd seek a motion to approve the resolution as submitted.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you for recognizing Herb. I had a feeling he was doing the negotiating here. And so the township originally was going to be responsible for the entire cost. And at this point, PennDOT is going to pay 75%, which is very good news for the township. We will be reimbursed for that. So Herb, thank you for your diligent work. Are there any board questions on this resolution? Any from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve said resolution?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item D, we have a resolution extending conditional offer of employment to the entry-level position of patrol officer in the township's police department to candidates number 48231 and number 86119, conditioned upon the individual satisfactorily completing medical and psychological examinations to confirm their fitness for duty. And I'll call on our Chief of Police, Glenn Dorney, to explain.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. This is just a process. We're still working our way through the civil service list for open positions on the police department, and the next two candidates up are number 48231 and 86119. And again, this just gives us the opportunity to start the background process. It's certainly not putting them on the street and hiring them as an employee, but it is giving us the opportunity to start that process. So we are respectfully requesting that these two candidates move forward in the process.
Very good, Chief. Thank you. Any board discussion? Any from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to proceed with said resolution?
So moved.
And a second? I have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Chief, and good luck.
Thank you.
Moving on to motions. Agenda item 9A, we have a motion to proceed with the award of the towing operator services contract. Chief Dorney, I will ask you to explain this one as well.
All right. Yes, we went through the bid packets that were submitted on November 7th. 4 proposals for tow operator services were received and opened. The formal request for proposals was advertised twice in a local publication as required by law and made accessible on the South Whitehall Township website. All 4 proposals were reviewed by our purchasing department, Donna Zacharu, and myself. As shown on the attached tabulation sheet, 3 of the 4 companies have items not answered in their response. The township reserves the right to waive any irregularities and formalities and feel we exercise this right to award these services with the information being supplied by the contractor prior to executing the contract. We are respectfully requesting contracts be awarded to Ironton Towing and Stu's Tire Center to be used for the rotation of the township's towing needs. The RFP was for up to 2 towing contractors. So these were the 2 best responses based on the tabulation sheets.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation, Chief. And please give our thanks to whoever compiled this spreadsheet.
That would be Donna.
The presentation is very, very helpful to be able to read the different responses and compare and review as you did when you went through the selection process. So thank you. Are there any questions on this motion? Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I just wanted to ask, I see where some of the respondents did not respond to a couple questions referring to criminal background.
Correct.
So my question is, from a township point of view, is that a standard question that we ask for all bids about criminal background of employees?
I don't know about all bids, but for the towing contract, we do, just because of the fact that they're taking somebody else's property and it's in their custody and control once it leaves us.
Okay.
So we do that for the towing contract every year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Any other board discussion? Anything from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to proceed with said motion?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second? I'll make that second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. On to agenda item B, motion to award the bid for the Tillman Street Bridge Utility Relocation Project, bid number 2022-07. And I will ask our Director of Township Operations, Herb Bender, to please explain.
Yes, Monday, November 28th at 10 a.m., we opened the bid for the sanitary sewer line relocation out there by the Tillman Street Bridge. We have received 4 bids. We are looking to award the bid to J.O. Bradley in the total of $473,060. Again, we didn't budget $250,000 this year, but we were able to encumber $250,000 from a different line item. And then we did budget the other $250,000 for next year. The difference that we have from the $500,000 that we'll have total is Public Works is going to have to do the restoration of the paving work at the Commerce Center once we get the easement from them. So to keep that cost down, we're going to do the actual pavement work in-house. Again, with this project, the Turnpike has agreed to a 50-50 cost share with the township. So we will pay it out. Once the project is completed, they will reimburse us 50% of this project.
Excellent. Thank you, Herb. Just a question, when they reimburse, does that go back into?
That'll go back into the sewer fund.
Okay, very good.
And just so everyone knows, we're looking for the award. We do have to finalize the 2 easements yet. We are in talk. They do have the Commerce Building and the HOA in Upper Macungie. They both do have the agreements. It's with their solicitors. Once we have those back, we will come back to let you know that we do have everything finalized.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any board discussion on this motion?
Just have a quick question, Herb. Do you think there's any possibility we won't get those easements?
If they don't, then we might have to go eminent domain and just take them.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rogers?
I just wanted to comment that I'm happy to see that we've had a positive experience before with them. And the references were good too. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
J. O'Reilly is a very good company.
A nice low bid. Very nice. If there's no more board discussion, any public comment?
Commissioner Kelly?
Of course.
Yeah, just a question. Herb, I just wanted to pick up on what you said about if we aren't granted the easements. If there were any need, perceived need anyway, to exercise eminent domain, that would be something that would come before the board before that's exercised? Is that correct?
Yes, of course, Brad.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I don't see it going that way. I'm just letting you know, we're working with them. Their solicitors are looking at the agreements. But if someone does want to play hardball, that might be an option we do have to look at.
Right. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. There's no other board comment at this time. Is there any public comment? I'll call for the vote. Is there a motion to proceed with said motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Herb. Moving on to correspondence and information items. I'll call on our township manager, please, to review our upcoming meeting dates.
Thank you. Thursday, December 8th, we have an emergency management services meeting. Tuesday, December 13th, Planning Commission Comprehensive Plan meeting, 7 p.m. Wednesday, December 14th, Civil Service Commission, 10 a.m. Thursday, December 15th, Planning Commission, 7:30 p.m. Monday, December 19th at 10 a.m., Landscape and Shade Tree Commission. Monday, December 19th, also the Green Advisory Council, 6 p.m. For further details, please see the Township website.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to old business, agenda item 11A, Where's Dam? Director of Township Operations, Herb Bender. Give us an update.
Yes, we actually met with the contractor today. We did run into some issues down there at the dam, so we were in a little bit of a holding pattern. We were working with DEP to get everything resolved. Due to having to wait for new rebar to come in, due to the dam being thicker than originally anticipated, we had to order new rebar, which has incurred a new cost, and for more concrete. We are currently I just met with them today, so barring we have no other changes that we have to do or anything, we will be at $357,086.50. Just so everyone knows, there was $850,000 put aside for this project. So we are still considerably under budget.
Excellent. That's good news, Herb. Thank you. Thank you for the update, and thank you for staying on top of this, keeping us updated. Any board comment on the Where's Dam? Anything from the public? Okay, moving on to old business item B, comprehensive plan update. Dave Manhart, Community Development Director.
Yes, so as Tom mentioned, we have the comprehensive plan workshop this coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. What we are currently working on is we finalized the land use, so we will bring those changes back to the boards for discussion. We simplified things. There was a lot of discussion at the previous workshop. We took that and kind of brought it back in and kind of simplified and streamlined. The second thing that we'll be covering at that workshop is the implementation plan. We've gone through comments that we've received and have been making updates to that. We had an internal staff meeting that was very productive and hopefully went a long way to simplifying and clarifying a lot of the comments that we did receive. So we will be presenting those. Additionally, changes have been sent to the graphic designer, so they will be incorporated into the plan and should be available to go out Friday in Friday's agenda packet. That represents a final draft. And then any changes beyond that will typically be minor changes that we can handle in-house. Probably going to be text changes, maybe moving some things, or hopefully just moving some things around. So that's kind of where we're at. As we mentioned before, or as was mentioned before, we're getting close. So it's nice to see that we're finally getting to this point. So excited for the coming meeting.
Excellent, Dave. I share your excitement. I know you've worked very hard with Greg and all the staff to get this pulled together. Thank you all for your work, and I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product. Is there any board comment on this update? Public comment? Okay, moving on to direction and discussion. Agenda item 12A, we have the farm lease between South Whitehall Township and Donald Newhard Farms. Donald Newhard Farms. And I will ask our township manager to explain this agenda item.
Thank you. As the board is aware, the township acquired approximately 26.87 acres located at 1036 Springhouse Road from the Davises. This land has been subsequently classified as Davis Smith Open Space. The agreement of sale required the township to deliver a lease agreement to permit the continued and uninterrupted farming of the property by the current tenant and the tenant's heirs, successors, and assigns. The current agricultural operator has provided notification to the township that they will continue to utilize the property for the 2023 calendar fiscal year pursuant to the requirements of the current lease. So no action required from the board. I will also make sure that they have the appropriate insurance in place required by the agreement.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that to the board to keep us updated. Just for the record, we did receive a very gracious thank you letter from the Newhard family included in this packet. They thanked us for allowing them to use our land to farm, and we certainly do look forward to the tradition of the Newhards farming the Springhouse Road land for many years to come. Any board comment on this agenda item? Any public comment? Okay, moving on to direction discussion item B, Trexler Boulevard, Suncrest traffic calming recommendation from PennDOT Local Technical Assistance Program reviewed by the Public Safety Commission on December 5th, 2022. And Tom, you present.
Thank you. Yes, so the township submitted a technical assistance request to the local technical assistance program through PennDOT to examine traffic calming concepts for both Trexler Boulevard and Suncrest Drive. The township has received complaints about speed or traffic or the speed of traffic on both roadways. Based on the observations and recommendations of LTAP, Trexler Boulevard would be appropriate for traffic calming measures. Suncrest, for permanently affixed traffic calming measures on Trexler Boulevard, such as a Watts speed hump. Suncrest Boulevard, it was not recommended based on the speed report that came back to have a permanently affixed traffic calming measure. The township at this time does not have a traffic calming policy. That is a recommendation of PennDOT that we would implement one. So the township did take this matter to the Monday night's Public Safety Commission meeting and recommended that the next step be taken as to set a public meeting to review possible traffic calming measures with residents at the January 9th Public Safety Commission meeting. So basically, I'm just informing the board of this and seeing if you have any issues with that approach. But that was the recommendation for public safety, that we view this more as a pilot program, that we would, if we were to install traffic calming measures on Trexler Boulevard, that we would use that in order to gain data and insight as to how they would be working. And they would also be installed by Public Works. But before we get to that point, we want to review this with the neighborhood and the surrounding the property owners that are on the surrounding roads. And that would be done at the January 9th Public Safety meeting. We've already put together a mailer, which would then be distributed by Public Works. So it's ready to go. I just wanted to make sure the board's okay with that.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Anytime we can get resident input specifically for the residents who will be affected if this change were to be made, I think that's very, very important. So I appreciate you doing that in conjunction with public safety.
Thank you. And it's very important to do this for traffic calming. And that's what if we were to adopt a policy, it would articulate this, the fact that, you're impacting people's front yards and so forth potentially, or where it's being placed. The pattern of use of the roadways is going to change. So it's going to have, wide implications. It's the type of feedback that we want to receive from residents.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Any other?
I think Brad has, yeah.
Yep, I have a question. Yes, so part of Trexler Boulevard, if I'm right, is in the city of Allentown?
Yes, it is.
So would we be, I understand we don't have to, but would we be communicating with them, if it gets to that point?
Yes.
Bringing them into the loop?
Yes, so we maintain the road. We have an arrangement with them.
Oh, okay.
But basically, I think it would be appropriate if it gets to the point of where we're actually installing these fixtures, we should let the city know. They may or may not really have anything to say about it.
Right.
But I think we should afford them the opportunity to do so if they want to.
So we could speed for half of Trexler Boulevard and slow down for our half. But no, I say that because I think it's probably appropriate to coordinate if there's any coordination to be done with them.
Yes.
Also, these calming, if they include speed bumps, water runoff on that road is a big topic. So I wouldn't want any kind of road changes to.
What we do is keep them a foot short of the complete road width. That way the water can still run down the shoulder.
Okay. I knew you'd be on it, Herb.
And these are the longer type speed humps. They're not, your old fashioned, outmoded type of, the ones that are like in shopping centers or so forth. We can't legally install them on the roadways.
Yeah, these are like 5 to 6 feet wide.
It's almost like a little table, isn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Are those speed bumps rough? Are they smooth bumps? You know how sometimes when you're going into the turnpike toll exchange, it's rough and it shakes your
No,
car.
no, those are rumble strips.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what it's called. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're not putting those.
Yeah, they're just smooth asphalt. Yeah.
I do just have one question. I know you mentioned you were putting together a mailer for residents. Would that apply just to residents on Trexler Boulevard, but also others in the neighborhood?
No, if you let me look. I don't have the roads memorized yet, but
Okay, no,
Trexler
this-
Boulevard, West Highland, Congress, 36th, 38th, 35th, all of those would receive notification, that whole surrounding area.
Excellent, because I do know a lot of residents of that neighborhood use Trexler Boulevard, and they're turning out onto Trexler from some of those roads as well.
Yes, you are correct.
My only comment is sitting on public safety for the last number of years. I think Chief can attest to the fact that we've had quite a few complaints on Trexler Boulevard.
Yeah,
And
we've
that's what
had,
triggered some of this happening. So I appreciate all the work that's been done on this.
Yeah.
We've had residents actually come and speak before public safety.
and I've been in communication with those residents as well, just to let them know that it was going to be brought up tonight as well at this meeting to make sure they do understand that we are working on it. Obviously, we can't do it overnight, but it's something that needs to be addressed. And, just another issue that we've tried to do speed timing in that area, but it is extremely difficult. Again, being the only state in the nation that is not allowed to utilize radar based on legislation in Pennsylvania. So that's just another, I guess, pitch that we need to continue to discuss that with our local legislators as to why that we are the only state in the nation that cannot use radar for the safety of our public. So just take that moment to throw that in there.
Yeah, just another comment, if I can, about Suncrest Boulevard, Suncrest Drive. I do travel that road frequently where I live. And I will say that, unfortunately, prior to high school starting and right after high school lets out, that's where the kids are coming out the back entrance to Parkland, and they go on that and they do it. And I see them come in my street, and it's only those two, the morning and evening usually, you see it. So, and I know Chief's aware of that.
Yeah, and what LTAP said with that road was that we should try traditional safety speed mitigation items such as pavement markings and signs, because it didn't quite meet the threshold for traffic calming, but we should probably follow through with the recommendations.
And we don't need to get into a lengthy discussion tonight about it, but I recall that Hillview and also Lap Road were frequent complaints from residents. Is this something that we would, once we get through this topic?
I think so I discussed this with Dave Manhart and Herb Bender. I think what our recommendation would be is to, if we're going to do this on a widespread basis across the township, we do need to proceed with adopting a policy. I think we're kind of viewing Trexler Boulevard just based on the nature of the fact that we have received a number of complaints and we do have justification from a technical basis to start proceeding with this. But I think if we're going to do it across the township, we probably should proceed with the plan, which is also a recommendation of the implementation phase of the comp plan as well.
And if I could just jump in here, just to give a little bit of history. We did have a tech assist and we went through this process for, is it Park Drive or I forget the Dillon Drive. And one of the recommendations was to adopt a traffic calming policy. We drafted a traffic calming policy when George Kinney was here and brought that to the board. And the board took no action on it. So there is a traffic calming policy drafted. I think as part of the comprehensive plan, one of the implementation items is to resurrect that and review it and make changes to that. So it may be something that could happen relatively quick.
Very nice. Thank you for that update, Dave.
You're welcome.
Any other board discussion on this matter? Any public comment? Yes, sir. You would again give us your name and address for the record.
Ray Pivison again from, I live on Bryant and Kilmer, which is not too far off the beaten path there. Just a couple questions. What is the definition of a collector road? Is that this is a collector road, Trexler Boulevard? Just want to get some education.
That's a good, I don't have the definition off the top of my head.
Biggie.
But...
And the tree that sets a quarter way out on Trexler Boulevard, is that the township's tree or is that the golf course? Or as you go up Trexler, as many of you know when you drive, there's a tree, a big tree like that sets out. It's on the Allen. Okay, that answers that question there. And I guess the road really. Mhm. Okay, that answers that question. All right. Yeah, that.
Because you also have to look when you place them to place them in an area that they're not going to just drive around into someone's yard to get around them instead of slowing down.
And the road is, safety-wise, is wide enough for two cars. It should not
Yeah,
maybe be
yep.
one way, that road?
No, it is wide enough for two cars.
It is wide enough for two cars. It's close sometimes when you go through.
Yeah, it is tight if you have a bigger vehicle coming through, yes.
Okay, very good. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can give you, so all the streets in the township are classified. So when we talk about a local, that's your standard neighborhood roads. The collectors are really what connect neighborhoods to arterials. So the whole point is to keep on getting bigger and wider. So it's the local roads go to collectors, our arterials are your regional roads, Cedar Crest Boulevards, the 309s, things like that. So those are the roads that we're intending to take all the neighborhood traffic, all the local streets, get them out of the neighborhoods and then onto 22. So you think of it like a tiered system, if you will.
Okay, and if I could ask, could Sagamore Hills be included in that mailing? That Sagamore Hills would be right across, actually, if you took Truxtun Boulevard and you came to the end, you just kept going, stop at the stop sign and go right into the cornfield, you're coming right into Sagamore Hills there. That's heavily used by that area there. I guess that would be Kilmer and Bryant going back that way there. And that's actually, it feeds into the newer development. That's where all that traffic comes from. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item C, zero balance billing recommendation from the Finance Department. And we will ask our Director of Finance, Tricia Dickert, to explain.
Good evening, Commissioners. So a few days ago, the Finance Department drafted a memo issuing a recommendation on a conversation we had during the last BOC meeting with respect to zero balance bills. I'm going to go over what the recommendation is, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about, very briefly, about some additional things that I've had a chance to think about specifically today. So the recommendation that I listed in the memo was to spend the first half of the year focusing on pushing electronic billing. I felt like putting a mailer with the refuse bills that go out the first quarter of the year was a good way to check 3 boxes. We could build our database for Nixle 360, which would help push out community messages to South Whitehall Township residents. We could push the message of signing up for electronic billing to anyone that receives a refuse, water, and sewer bill, and we could potentially reach the 500 or so people that are impacted by zero-based bills. I thought about this a little bit more today. I wonder if while the mailer with respect to building the Nixle database and pushing electronic billing is a good idea, I wonder if sending 7,000 notices that list a bullet point that only affect 500 people more upset 6,500 people than give us clarity on 500. So I think at this point, the mailer is still a good idea to be included in the refuse bills, but if it's the desire of the board to drop zero balance bills, then the Finance Department will proceed with that. I did think a little bit about other ways that we could reach these 500 people. My biggest concern with some of the ideas that were brainstormed is the amount of time that it's going to take for me to reach 500 people and then collect those responses, compile the data, and will we have just ended up in the same exact position that we're in right now? So while I'm still definitely willing to do that, the handout that you have right now, memo aside, showed a potential mailer that could go with the refuse billing. and my assistant for the evening, Mike Elias, is going to give you new sheets that show you something that's a little bit different. That just kind of narrows this to those two questions, which is Nixle and then pushing electronic billing.
Mike, is that a promotion or demotion?
Be careful how you answer that, Mike. So what Mike is handing out to you now is basically the replacement mailer, obviously with the board's approval. And if the recipient of the refuse bill scans the first QR code, it will take them to a link on the township's website to sign up for electronic billing. And if the recipient of the bill scans the second QR code, it takes them right away to the registration page for South Whitehall Township's Nixle 360. With that, my time is up, and I leave this with all of you to make the decision.
Quick question, if I can, Trish. And I know you're going to think of me this way, but what do you do with the people who don't have phones to scan the QR code?
So if you read it, Dave, it says that they can either scan the QR code to register, or if they prefer, they can return the mailer with their payment, and then I will collect those and manually add those to the database.
Yeah, saw that. The only thing I'm concerned about is if somebody sees it and doesn't read it. I know it's not your.
I don't know that I can control that.
Yeah. Okay.
The only minor suggestion I might make on these is to ask for their name in case it were to get separated somehow from the payment. To have their name on, there's not a, it's an email address and a mobile.
I could change the spacing a little bit and add name.
I think this is a great way to build, certainly for Nixle. It's a great opportunity we have to communicate with our residents and certainly to push electronic billing. Always a plus to cut down on the work of the finance department.
I just have one question. So I agree with everything that's been said. You'll be able to, once these are returned, identify possibly the percentage of those who typically receive zero balance bills and who have signed up for electronic billing. You'll be able to say, okay, we've halved that number.
So I think that half of that is yes and half of that is no. So with the newly designed insert, it basically just drops the whole question surrounding zero balance bills.
Yeah, you'll be able to take, even with the new mailer, you'll be able to go through that and say, okay, we've now taken that number from 500 because of those that have signed up for electronic billing down to 250, 300.
I don't know that we'll ever know that number because it seems to me that the desire of the board was to switch that button off on zero base bills altogether and then just let the chips fall. We know that some people are probably going to be thrilled about that, and I presume that some people may not. But I think that the mailer in its current form addresses two things. Maybe only one had something to do with zero-based billing, but the other one definitely, you're welcome, Herb. The other one helps her build the Nixle 360 database.
So to follow up on Commissioner Roth's question, if someone who receives zero balance bills and still wanted a proof of their payment, if they were to call a township, are you able to generate something to send to them if they needed? Or is there a form that we could send them to say your account was paid on whatever date, and if someone does?
So, we can look at what the options are, but once that button is turned off, we can't generate anything that looks like what they're used to receiving unless we create something manually. Right now, the only thing that I could think that we could give them that would show them the payment was applied is a screenshot, albeit unprofessional. I'm not exactly sure what else we can give. Unfortunately, it works well in one direction, but not necessarily the other. So we can turn everybody on piece by piece for electronic billing, but once that button is turned off for zero balance bills, it's off for everybody. And if they want a copy of what would have generated, because the button was off, it won't generate, so there won't be a copy to give them.
Well, to that point, not necessarily a copy of what they've gotten in the past, but could we draft some sort of a document or form that would say, their name and address, payment was received on whatever date, and it's an acknowledgement from the township. So if someone wanted a piece of paper that said their bill was paid, we could
Yeah,
generate
we could
something.
find it. I mean, we could find a way to do that in the
Okay,
one-off
that's my
request. I think my
concern.
bigger concern is, how many people request that. So it's manageable if it's a handful. If we reach a point where, a significant amount of people are requesting that, then I think at that point, we probably need to reevaluate whether or not
Right.
shutting that button off was the right decision to
Sure,
make.
and you could bring that back to the board for
Absolutely,
discussion.
we'll do that, yes.
Okay.
I do like that option, Tricia, having a form or something available to them, because I think if it's very important to someone, they can go and they can get that receipt, like a paid in full type thing, So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people do, especially the people that require the receipt, they usually send a note with their payment that says, and usually a postage paid envelope. They usually send something in that says, please mail my receipt back to me. So we're really talking about the people that exist somewhere between I'm going to pay it and I didn't ask for a receipt to I'm used to receiving a zero balance bill. I didn't know I was going to get it. Now I want one. And I think that list, I'm hoping that list would be relatively short and we'll find a way to accommodate them.
And this is very helpful. And I think the community input is just so valuable. So thank you.
I agree with that. Yes.
Excellent. Is there any other discussion from the board? Any from the public? Yes. You have to come back to the microphone, I'm sorry, so that the people on the virtual can hear your question.
I forgot about that, apologies. Besides the obvious, just a generic dumb question. Why do they want, give me some examples of why they would need a receipt? And then also, could you go on a website, username, password, look at your account, or are we getting too far into the weeds for a small amount of people?
So I think the second question, could they go online and look at their account? I believe I don't know if the Citizen Online portal has the ability to just bill it. If they pay electronically using our third-party processor, sure, they would be able to access proof that they paid it. But I believe the Citizen Self-Service portal is geared mainly towards sending electronic bills, not necessarily receiving electronic payments. So I think the answer is no, but it's 2022. So I think we're headed to a place where, perhaps, especially 2020, if it taught us anything, it's let's try and find a way to get people to be able to pay this easier. So I think that's a bigger question and we should be headed in that direction. As far as examples of who would want the receipt, I mean, I don't really know the answer to that. Whoever wants receipts. I personally don't want a single one of them, but I'm probably cut from a different cloth, so I can't explain why people would want them.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can just shed some light on the citizen self-service. There's access to your customer history, so you can see all the payments that were made as part of that.
There you go. He just answered your question.
Teamwork. Thank you. So we all had your comments. Okay, so you good? I think everybody was in favor of.
Just knowing with 5 nods, I'm turning that button off and that will be effective the first quarter refuse bill in 2023, which will go out in January. 4 nods and 2 palms up. Okay.
My feeling is what I said last meeting, this is administrative function. We don't really need to be jumping in here. So whatever you think.
Thank you. And before I move on to courtesy of the floor, I just want to take a moment to thank our township staff. We had our tree lighting on Saturday. I want to thank Tom and Herb for planning and overseeing everyone else. It was a wonderful event, great for the community building. I'm thankful for everyone who helped make it a success. Finance and IT was there, decorating ornaments and doing s'mores with the residents. Township Police Department and volunteer fire companies, decorated vehicles, just very festive. South Whitehall Emergency Management did the same. Our Public Works Department, my goodness, if you go down to the park, it's outstanding. And if you see the campus here, they've decorated it. It's just beautiful. So thank you to all of them. We had our Boy Scouts making oven cobbler and pack 1600 serving hot dogs. And I will not forget to thank Santa Claus, who made an appearance And he was certainly the highlight of the event, and he went out of his way, and I witnessed this myself, to make the children feel very special. And I want to thank Santa for spreading joy. And one other thanks to Chief Dorney and all of your officers for Heroes for the Holidays. Thank you for the extension of the invitation to the board. I know all of us weren't able to attend. For those of you who don't know, I don't want to steal if you were going to speak about it, but 33 Parkland School District students were adopted by police with Upper Macungie and state police. And they went shopping at Target, and we had an opportunity over at the Dorney Park, Chicky and Pete's, to help the children wrap their gifts. And I personally spent a couple hours wrapping presents. But it wasn't the wrapping, it was the asking the children about themselves. Who did you buy these presents for? And just seeing their excitement to be able to give to their family members and buy some things for themselves. It was a very, very wonderful event. Thank you, Chief. And I know Officer Grozier and Brown probably had a lot of administrative duties there.
Yeah, I will give them all the credit because for the last several months, Sergeant Grozier and Lieutenant Brown have been diligently working to put this together. And it obviously, as you could tell, it does not happen overnight to be able to identify that many students, put all the logistics together. And just, I think the true meaning of it is a lot of media outlets, quite frankly, when they talk about taking, they use the term underprivileged children shopping. That is absolutely not the case. These are not underprivileged children. These are our kids that have faced some sort of trauma in life or some sort of difficult situation that this gives us an opportunity to team up with them to let them know that they have a support system in place, not just their teachers, the school district, but the police department and our community that stands behind them to help them work through issues that they face in life and to let them know that there are people out there to help them in time of need. So it's not just something that, you know, they typically get lumped into one category. It's good kids that have had some sort of difficulty in life, whether it be a family member sick, possibly passing away, some just tragic events in life, that it gives us an opportunity to bond with them and let them know that they have a community network in charge or in that event and here for them in the future to help them get through their issues. So it's a great event. And thank you. Many of you personally donated, but the Board of Commissioners in the budget season puts that money in that budget line item for us to do this. And I think that is one of the most important things that we do throughout the year, just based off of the bonds that we create during that, 3, 4, 5 hour session with those kids, and see the smile on their face and let them do something that they've never had an opportunity to do before. And then it extends beyond just that one day. So it's a great opportunity. And I personally thank you for the support that we get every year from the board and making this happen.
Well, I'll just add, I wish that the media was there with their video cameras, because what I observed was all of the tables, the children were having lunch with the officers and the bonding that was going on there. It was beautiful to observe. And that's the story you don't hear out in the community very much. And it was really wonderful so please pass our appreciation on to everyone. Did you have a comment? Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you. Thank you for making that happen in the park. I mean, I heard feedback from residents too, and everyone. It was just so positive, and you really uplifted people. And Chief, what you did, thank you so much. Who knows, you may be interviewing them in a couple years, right? That it might be an
Believe
inspiration.
me, I was recruiting.
Right? There you go. So thanks for making a difference.
No, I just want to comment what Monica said. The park, I was at the park Saturday night, Monica, with Diane. It was fantastic. Santa Claus did an unbelievable job. The kids loved him. I will tell you that. The kids absolutely loved when he came over the bridge in the little vehicle. They just ready to attack him. So he did a fantastic job. And we won't mention who he is, but he did a great job. And he's one of the Public Works employees within South Whitehall Township. And also, again, Heroes for the Holidays. I've been involved with that for about 7 years now. And it is, my wife and I look forward to it every year. It is fantastic. I did talk to several of the police officers, not just in South Whitehall, but in Upper Macungie. And they know who I was because I've been there for, like I said, about 7, 8 years. Several of them said to me they look forward to that every single year. And it was great to hear that. So thanks again.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13, courtesy of the floor. Is there anyone present who'd like to Yes.
Sorry, before we do courtesy of the floor for the public, I just want to announce in public meeting that the end of the year is coming and there's always a small shift in the schedule for the lobby. And I just wanted to make sure taxpayers know on December 30th, payments will be processed until 10 o'clock a.m. That gives finance staff an opportunity to post all of the batches and run all of the year-end reports so that they can go celebrate with their families. We will still take payments all day. Any payments that are received after 10 o'clock we'll post when we resume operations on Tuesday, first Tuesday of the new year.
Very good. Is that something we can add soon to the website? So
It's done.
It's already there. Of course it is. Thank you. I shouldn't have had to think to ask. Is there any other? Herb, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to let the full board know, today we had a well go down. We did have Cole Brothers in. They're taking a look at getting the parts and everything for us. Just so everyone is aware, everyone does have water at this time. It's not an issue. No one will go without water. But we are looking at a $70,000 repair. But with some projects that we have moved to in-house and some projects that we didn't get to do the full project, we are not going to need a transfer. We will be able to cover it out of budgeted money in that line item already this year.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the well being down, but thank you for working to get it resolved and for taking care of the financial aspect as well with the budget and for presenting it to our board so we're aware. Any other comment at this time from anyone in the audience? Anyone online? Dave with comments? Nothing. Okay, moving on to agenda item 14. I need a motion to authorize payment of invoices and disbursements.
Make a motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have no executive session this evening. I will make a motion to adjourn. Need a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This motion is adjourned. Thank you.